winner.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the Public Accountability meeting today on the 23rd of October. We'll just whiz round the room. Will, do you want to start?
Yeah, Will Naylor, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Fraser Sampson, Interim CEO.
Phil Kane, Deputy Chief Constable.
Claire Craven-Griffiths, Chief Constable, Chief of Staff.
Alan Westcott, Temporary Superintendent, Head of Partnerships for North Yorkshire Police.
And we've got Jenny, who will be with us, we hope, shortly.
Head of Commissioning and Partnerships.
Yeah. Apologies. We've got Chief Constable, apologies. Here's Jenny. Sorry. Chief Constable's apologies. Assistant Chief Constable Amanda Oliver's apologies, and Michael Porter's. We've also got apologies from Rob Bowles and Maria Earls. Okay, Will, do you want to do the minutes of the previous meeting?
Yeah, the minutes are straightforward as ever. There's little content because we just link to the streaming effectively for each agenda item. So unless there are any comments on pages 1 and 2, which I hope there aren't.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Item 3 then. Have we any questions from the public?
No.
No. Okay, thank you. Okay, Jenny.
Over to me.
Yeah, thank
Right.
you.
So, young people is the area that we're talking about. So my presentation covers the Youth Offending Services, North Yorkshire Youth Commission and the Children and Young Persons Strategy summary as well. So, I don't propose to go through the slides in kind of detail, but we'll just pick up the salient points if that's as you so wish.
Yep.
Okay. So, the first 2 slides cover the work that we do currently with the Youth Justice Service and the Youth Offending team. So this is really to give you an overview of some of the things that are important in terms of the work that we're doing. So the Youth Outcomes panel has been...
is it just worth saying Youth Justice is York and Youth Offending is North Yorkshire?
Youth Justice Service is North Yorkshire, Youth Offending team is York.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, the other way around.
Yeah,
Apologies.
was the other way around. Yeah. So North Yorkshire Youth Justice Service is the first slide. Next slide is the yacht slide for York. But this one just, both slides are quite similar.
Can I just for members of the public, what age does Youth Outcomes panel cover?
So it's 14. So the Youth Outcomes panel, this has been the focus area for both the Youth Justice Service and the Youth Offending team. But at the moment this just gives you an overview of some of the key outcomes that have come from this. So the focus has been on the first time entrants and the reoffending figures. So I'll just take you through those as an area of focus at the moment. So this slide
Sorry,
is
Jenny,
actually...
so can we just go, so what is the purpose of the Youth Outcomes panel?
So the Youth Outcomes panel detail comes next, if that's okay.
Okay,
It's just to
alright.
say that the work that we've been doing with the Youth Outcome, with the Youth Justice Service and the yacht is focused around the Youth Outcomes panel.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
so that we go into some detail on the next couple of pages around the Youth Outcomes panel itself. So it's just to share that the kind of the first time entrance figures have been impacted by the Youth Outcomes panel. And this just gives you an overview at the moment. There are some incorrect numbers on the slides which I do need to correct now. So it should be 195 per 100,000 for first time entrants for April 17 to March 18. And in terms of the 60% reduction in 24 months ending, it should be the 31st of the 3rd 18 rather than the 31st of the 12th 18, which hasn't happened as yet. So there's been a significant impact in terms of first time entrants. So that's partly due to the Youth Outcomes panel, but actually you'll see the period of time actually goes prior to the start of the Youth Outcomes panel. So there's been a lot of work done across North Yorkshire and York in relation to first time entrants over the period of time.
Okay, so we're seeing a significant reduction
Absolutely.
in first time entrants since the introduction of the Youth Outcomes panel
Yes.
in North Yorkshire.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's also the same in York when we come over to the next slide as well.
Okay.
In terms of reoffending as well, so this is in North Yorkshire, reoffending is taken from PNC, which is the system by which reoffending data is kind of considered from a youth perspective. This is historic data, so July to September 16 is what's reported here. This is again a 46.1% in terms of reoffending and a rate of reoffending of 7.22. But the period of time is quite historic. What's beneficial in York is that they use a live tracker, which means that actually the data is much more up to date and kind of we can see data on a quarterly basis. So it's something that I know that York have been talking to North Yorkshire about to see whether that's something that they want to consider.
So, are they the most up-to-date figures we've got?
But at the moment, from a North Yorkshire perspective, it is, yeah.
That's
It's
no
because it's
use
proven
to anybody,
reoffending.
is it?
Similar conversations that we have around the adult cohorts as well.
So it's meaningless then, not really that last one.
Yeah, it's quite out of date. Yeah.
2 years out of date.
Yeah, this
It
data
doesn't
we
mean
have
very
just
well,
got
but-
some more data in relation to that. That's not on these slides, so we've just had a new set of data, but yeah, it's still quite historic.
Can you have an action to have that then? We can publish that.
Yes. Yeah, so I'll do some updated versions of the slide to make sure they're well.
And in terms of North Yorkshire moving towards the tracker system, how developed are those
Okay.
conversations?
As I understand it, that's not the intention at the moment. I think what we've done from a Business Development and Innovation Board perspective is we've shared information about the live tracker. Sarah Autumn from York has given presentations about the kind of the successes that they've had around using the tracker and what it's meant they've been able to do. And again, people from North Yorkshire have been there and kind of listened to that. They've offered to share that learning experience, but at the moment there isn't an intention to move to the live tracker.
And have North Yorkshire given a reason for that?
Not in those meetings, no.
I think we
as
could
yet.
ask for a reason.
Yeah.
Because it seems completely barking to be working on figures that are 2 years old when there's been a significant change in the way that young people are dealt with in the county, and we're not able to assess that impact in North Yorkshire, where I understand there's the higher number of offenders as well.
Yes, in terms
Yeah.
of volume rates, yeah.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't make their figures look terribly good in comparison to York, because their reoffending rate is 46% and York's is 13%.
Yeah, in terms of the proportion, it's higher.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, just to say that York's figures for this quarter, which is quarter one of 18-19 on the next page, is actually lower than anticipated. So again, we're just looking in those
Why?
kind of looking into why. Yeah. So they do, but they can do that detailed work on that because the information is available via the live tracker for them. So.
Okay. And has anything else changed that might affect the numbers of first-time entrants and reoffending rates?
In terms of outside of the youth outcomes panel?
Yes.
I think there is other work going on. I think there's been a specific focus from the leadership team around first-time entrants in North Yorkshire specifically,
Right.
which has had an impact. I can't kind of detail that here, but I'm happy to go away and bring that back if you would like me to.
Oh, it's
Or
just trying to
just to
sort
do
of
an update.
understand what is effective and the impact of these things. So it's always difficult, isn't it, isolating a particular intervention from all of
Yes.
the other stuff that goes on around it.
Yeah.
But what we don't want to do is think that the youth outcomes panel is solely responsible for this,
Yeah.
when there might be other things that are contributing to that.
Yeah.
But all in all, 60% reduction in first-time entrants is very good news.
It's very, very successful. So whether
Yeah.
it's been the YOP
Yeah.
or whether it's been other factors, including
Yeah.
the YOP, it's a really
Yeah,
good news story.
yeah.
Can I, Jenny, my last bullet point, I know there's no, the figures that are out of date, is there anecdotal views as to whether reoffending's improved or not?
In terms of the data at the bottom, yes, yeah. I think again,
So,
the people around the tables talking,
That's good.
having conversations are saying actually, yes, it looks like the impact on reoffending is positive as well.
Because the implication might be, and I suppose it's getting behind the figures and into some sort of insight around what they're telling us. And I know nationally there's been a consensus, if you like, that with young people, what agencies have been successful in doing is reducing first-time offenders, but that leaves us with a relatively smaller cohort of young people with more challenging behaviour. And if that's what these figures are is that what these figures are telling us?
I think that definitely is the case in York, and they've identified that there is a small number of individuals who are causing significant concerns, and the Live Tracker is also helping them to focus in on that and look at additional resources to support those individuals. So
But can we not tell that from the North Yorkshire figures then?
not at the moment, no.
Right, okay, so that there's quite a lot of questions to ask then, I think. Yeah.
And they're doing that through the BDNI board, but also through the presence on the management boards as well.
Because that would that potentially changes the interventions that you then deliver to try
It
and
does.
deal with with the behaviour of those young
I
people.
can't remember the name of the national review that we spoke to the Minister about a while back, which found the same thing nationally.
Yes,
that
that's what
youth
I
funding's done a really good job for
Yeah.
the sort of lower end, less risky,
Yeah.
but actually when it gets to the sort of hard exchange group, not much has worked, and
I
they've
just-
made a difficult
yeah.
cohort.
I just wonder, because of that, how much engagement there is with the community safety partnerships and the safeguarding boards, and actually whether or not there's opportunities there with those two sets of boards to look at prevention intervention and a bit more of a focused intervention on some of these
Yeah.
individuals. Because some of the ones in here will also be vulnerable
Yeah.
young children that need safeguarding. So I imagine there'll be an overlap here if we
Definitely.
can look at sharing that data across.
And if you think about, things like county lines and those sort of things, they might be vulnerable to being exploited.
Well, with the wraparound service that the youth offending panel gives, it refers people into
Yeah.
CAMS, it refers
Yeah.
into Optivan and all these, so it's having all those professionals that know those people that are coming into the system early, so that we can wrap around all the professionals around the table as early as possible.
We're doing. Correct me if we're wrong, but seems like we're making real headway with the early intervention, but the more challenging cohort is still proving to be challenging, which is not unusual.
No, similar
Yeah.
in other areas. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, given that they will be responsible for a large number of offences, what does work with this
Yeah.
cohort of people, and how do we help support them?
And again, there is a lot of work going on because, particularly in York, where the Live Tracker has allowed focus in on those individuals at an earlier stage, because you're tracking them on a lifetime basis. It's meant that the ability to be able to try things earlier and try different things, you're seeing the results on an
Yeah.
immediate basis, which I think, again, Sarah has said has been really, really helpful in terms of changing the way in which they're working with specific individuals. Again, you can see it on an individual basis as well as a cohort basis, which is really helpful too.
Okay, so should we go on to York then?
Yes, so in terms of York, 393 in relation to 100,000. So that's the 12-month rolling reporting period, an improvement on the previous reporting period. And then in terms of reoffending, this is a 3-month reporting reoffending, but this is from the Live Tracker. This is Q1 18-19, so it's a 13% in terms of proportion, and then a rate of 3.15 per reoffender. But as it says there, one prolific reoffender is impacting those.
So how long have they been using the Live Tracker?
So the Live Tracker has been in place for over a year now. They were using it initially for a cohort, but they've now moved to using it for the whole cohort. So so that's been in place since October now. They're using the kind of for the full cohort now.
So obviously the most interesting thing is to track that over time,
Yes,
rather than just look at this number in isolation.
absolutely. Yeah.
So what do we think that York are doing that is working then, that North Yorkshire are not doing?
And I think it's I wouldn't necessarily say that they're not doing. I think the Live Tracker provides you the ability
We
to
don't
drill
know.
down into information at a detailed level, which at the moment
I think
North Yorkshire
we don't know
don't
what North
have.
Yorkshire outcomes are, so
Right.
we can't say
Yeah.
they're not. They might not be, but not knowing is worse, because you could be wasting your time, or they could be doing really good. We don't know.
But the outcomes in North Yorkshire that we have are still very positive. But we think that the Live Tracker could add value, so
Okay, so but we've no data to support that.
we don't at the moment though.
Okay, so that's a
What
big-
leads you to believe the outcomes are good then?
But the outcomes are positive because we are having reductions in terms of reoffending.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not that they aren't there, they are historic, but actually again when you're talking to the people who are dealing on a day-to-day basis with cases and cohorts, the reports at the management board are very positive.
There's a data lab on
There is a data line, yeah, PNC, yeah. So that's, again, it's why the live tracker would be useful there, but obviously that's a decision that sits elsewhere in terms of whether they would take that up. I think they're looking at other potential alternatives as well. So it might not be that it's the live tracker, but it could be that it's something else that allows them to use information in a more lifetime basis.
So, in terms of the stuff that works, then,
Yeah.
what other than the youth outcomes panel, because we will come on to that. What interventions are we making in these young people's lives in order to improve their life chances?
And I think some of that comes from some of the youth outcome work because obviously the interventions are put in place on the back of the youth outcome. So some
Okay.
of them are referenced in the next pages, but if you don't get what you want from that, we can pick that up in addition if that's okay. We move on. Yeah. So, in relation to the youth outcomes panel, so the purpose of the panels is to make sure that from a proportionality and appropriateness perspective that is applied as standard to decision making, and where appropriate young people are dealt with outside of the criminal justice system. So that's the purpose of the panels.
Okay, so can you just give me for members of the public looking at this might all be gobbledygook.
Yeah.
So how does this work? What happens when a young person comes to the panel? Does a young person come to the panel, or is it? Explain how it works.
Yeah. So if we just move slightly to the next page, the kind of the process, and I won't take you through that because that'll give you more gobbledygook. Really. So the North Yorkshire police officers look at the gravity of the offence. So what is the offence? What's happened? What are the circumstances involved in it? And they give that a gravity score. So how serious is it considered that offence was?
And do the police do that on their own?
The police do that initially as a referral mechanism,
Right.
but then the Youth Justice Service and the Youth Offending Team then become involved and do an assessment of information that they've got on their systems and the partners. So they look at the information in relation to that individual, not just the individual incident that's brought about the referral. They then look at a number of different pieces of information that sit on multiple systems, and I won't go through the terms, but they include an offence summary, they include information in relation to victim statements, and they also include the seriousness of other previous offences as well. So they take into consideration all of that information, and then they sit as a senior panel. So that would be the Youth Justice Service, the Youth Offending Team, and North Yorkshire Police as a multi-agency panel, discuss the circumstances of the incident and other circumstances for the individual leading up to that incident, and they make a decision about the best possible outcome for that individual as to whether that's the criminal justice process or whether it's taking a more informed approach, and what types of intervention would be best for that individual. So that's the process in a nutshell.
Where does, to pick up on Phil's point then,
Yeah.
where does vulnerability come into this?
And I think the vulnerability comes into the information that comes from North Yorkshire Police, and it's also the information that's picked up from either county or city from the Youth Offending Team or the Youth Justice Service in terms of their interactions with other services within county and city. So they will pick up information.
So I'll give you a practical example then. So for example, if a child had been identified through OP and Compass, would that feed into this?
Yes.
Yes, right, okay.
So we are, we're not saying we're there yet,
Yeah.
but I do think, certainly again through domestic violence examples, where you've got young people who are offenders to adults in domestic violence, we're also now saying actually we need to be looking at these individuals as potentially victims as well as offenders. So what safeguarding measures need to be put in place? I think again across the board this is where it's starting to push us out and test some of our thinking around criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation lead to children committing crimes. Actually it's what sits behind that. and what assessments sitting behind that around safeguarding. So again, Alan Hard is starting to push that through some of the training things now as well.
So it's because yesterday I was in London on the Pharma Review, which is about female offenders, not about children. But there was a lot of discussion around whether this model would work for women as well. And there were 2 service users who came into that environment, they're in the jargon, adverse childhood experiences, trauma, trying to adopt a trauma-informed approach to this as opposed to a criminal justice approach, which I think is really important.
Yeah, there's a balance.
Yes.
Because I think if they're committing a crime, we still need to deal with the crime.
Yes,
element.
absolutely.
But
Yes.
you're absolutely right. We need to look at what has been the impact that has led the individual to the position where they're in, where they've committed the crime, and actually, is there a vulnerability that means that they're a victim as well as being the offender for that particular crime?
And what circumstances, because very often there are a whole range of circumstances that create an environment for a young person
Yes.
to offend. And if we are really going to deal with reoffending, then we've got to deal with some of those root causes
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
those problems, rather than
Yes.
a punitive. You might need a punitive intervention as well,
Yeah.
right from wrong and all that, but actually to get to the real heart of that, CAMS, mental health services, domestic situations, if they're part of No Wrong Door, then that will be flagged through this process in any event, one would assume.
Yeah, sometimes it's looking at the offending as a symptom as opposed to a cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how
close are the panels to that approach?
Oh, very much so. I mean, it comes from that kind of approach to look at the whole person and the circumstances around the individual, rather than focusing in on the incident itself. So it's very much about making sure that we're trying to address the underlying causes.
And assuming, given there's only 3 partners, which is, you were sort of saying they'll bring with them information from other partners, even though they're not around the table. And are you comfortable that works well enough? You don't need social care in the room or whoever else it might be.
Yeah, to be honest, youth offending team have been coming from that angle for quite some years. It's the police. We're playing the catch up because we've been driving from an offender point of view. And I think actually we're now understanding the vulnerability area better. It's allowing us to see the broader picture of this. So I think actually the youth offending team is a real good support to policing and helping us understand this area of business.
So the reason I'm sort of picking at this a little bit is that what you've got underneath your fortnightly senior panel is a list of offender type things as opposed to vulnerability type things, and that's why I'm just probing a little bit. That's all. Yeah. Okay.
And we're comfortable and confident at the moment that those things are being taken into consideration.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Shall I move on just a little bit to panel outcomes? So there are a range of outcomes that could come from a panel. So they range from no further action to a charge, including a community restorative disposal or a drug alcohol referral. So the things that you talked about there, Julia, in terms of addressing underlying needs, but also addressing in a again not necessarily a punitive nature, but a restorative nature to the approach. So those community restorative disposals can be used to the benefit of the victim and the community in which the offence has taken place. The whole purpose of this is to choose the most appropriate intervention and referral for an individual who's at panel. So that's a key aspect of that. There could be a first youth caution, which would be a multi-agency response via prevention, youth justice or youth offending team, or the children's social care in terms of the CSC.
Can I ask, Jenny, on the choice of outcome?
Yeah.
You've said already a couple of times that the victim feedback is included in that process. You've got a victim statement up there. We found by the out-of-court disposal panel, which is more broad than this, that isn't the case as much as you'd like, and it hasn't changed that much over the years. It remains a problem, the main problem with out-of-court disposals. How is this any different to that? Is there a better focus on victims, or is it? will it reflect the sort of findings of the panel?
I'm not sure I can say whether it's a better, but I do feel comfortable and confident that victims are taken into consideration in the process. It was built with that in mind, so I think we're probably starting from a better position, but I think there's always more that we can do in relation to that. We've got obviously the restorative justice offer from our perspective is available there if it's appropriate. There are a number of other restorative type options in the community.
And I presume that victim dialogue comes from the specifically from the police. If an officer involved in the case hasn't done that, then it won't reach the youth outcome panel either.
But there's a responsibility from the Youth Justice Service and the Youth Offending Team to have contact with the victim as well.
So you're
Yeah,
more
so
likely
you get that
you're
from
more
both
likely to
sides.
achieve it than a more general outcomes panel that's just got that one opportunity. Okay. That's good.
So sorry, I'm back on my little
That's okay.
the same thing again. So on panel outcomes, they're all criminal justice outcomes. So what
Some
about
of those are, sorry. It was just to go through what happens if we go to a first youth caution, so it's a multi-agency response rather than that being the totality of the options available.
okay? So what other options are available then?
So that some of the things that we've been working in partnership with the Youth Justice Service, the Youth Offending Team, is the kind of the commissioned options. So things like the Restorative Justice Service, things like the Respect programme that we've got as well, which is again about kind of that balance between are you a victim or are you an offender in terms of that kind of inter-family abuse. So there's services like that which are available to the panel to make a referral into. Again, we're looking at some of the things that might be appropriate for individuals that we don't currently have commissioned, and then making those available as a need arises. So that's what we're looking at the moment.
Okay, so the list is relative. I mean, obviously there's all of your substance misuse,
So,
mental health services, and all of the rest of it. Do they make referrals into
Oh,
mental health services?
absolutely, in terms of the standard statutory services, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
For referrals to those.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point then it would be quite interesting to understand. I mean, there are other there are other things that, so the community fund, for example, funds a whole range of youth-based interventions, and the question is how you wrap all of this up to provide a formal set of pathways.
And that's what we've been trying to do. So Nicole works really closely with the Youth Justice Service Youth Offending Team to make sure that all of the options that are available from the Community Fund or Community Safety Services Fund perspective are at least known to the panel. So again, I think we've got more work to do to make sure that the pathways are understood into those services and what complements each other, but we're on that journey. So
I went up to Gateshead to see the way that they're again it's around women, but there's a parallel here around the way that their women's health hub works there. Really impressive structure to the way that they've developed their pathways through their out-of-court disposals process, and they are have a very clear strategy around out-of-court disposals, but for women and for others actually, and they've developed a very specific set of interventions which the police officer there was on a mission to do, and she has done a really, really good job with it. And you've got a very well established partnership working there with the probation service as well, which I think is a really good model, and I think it would be worth us looking at that. It is really well structured.
You get have a look at that.
Yeah. And Sarah, I think Sarah's going to see it from a female point of view, but it's the way they've structured it which was really impressive.
Is it adults and children?
We were there specifically looking at it from a female point of view. So for example, one of the pathways that they had, which wasn't female related, was for veterans.
Right. Okay.
So they have a specific pathway for women. They have a specific pathway for veterans. So it was really interesting the way that they've structured it.
So the next slide just takes you some of the detail in terms of breaking down who's been to panel and what the outcomes have been. So we've had 29 youth outcomes panels since, or between May 17 and June 18. That's probably one there every fortnight, so that adds up just about. 100% attendance by all agencies involved, which is good. We've had 315 offence referrals, but they relate to 273 individuals, young people, so the majority are males, 67% versus 33% for females. In terms of kind of the most common kind of age, 23% were aged 15. In terms of the makeup of the kind of the localities from which the young people are coming from, so 22% of young people coming through the panels have been from Scarborough, versus the 13% of the 10 to 17 population that they represent. 28% from York versus the 22% of the 10 to 17 population that they represent. In terms of looked after children, 17% of cases, but 23% of North Yorkshire cases, so higher proportion from a North Yorkshire perspective are looked after children.
Would that be reflective of the developed nature of their services?
I think it could well be. We haven't looked into more detail about that, but again, people are looking into that now, given that it's been highlighted as a kind of a specific like imbalance between York and North Yorkshire.
Jenny, can I just ask, is that just the looked after children that fall under North Yorkshire and York local authorities?
Yes.
So the ones that are in private?
No, it does. It covers both actually.
Covers
So it
both.
covers both. Yeah, yeah. 117 of those 315 offences, or 37%, were related to violent offences, so quite a significant amount.
Can that be violence without injury?
Yes, it could be, yeah. So, and as you've seen perhaps on the previous slide, there's 48% of outcomes were dealt with outside of the criminal justice service, so through intervention or support referrals. But there's just some further information about the type of outcomes that came from panels. So 46% being community resolution disposals, 3% no further actions, and 26% were youth conditional cautions. And again, we said we have seen a reduction in first-time entrants across both York and North Yorkshire in relation to the youth outcome panel.
How far into the education space does it go? So I don't think they've applied for community funding before, but there's charities who work with pupil referral units to to educate children in a different way and often deal with children that might be on the fringes of this kind of behaviour as well. But I don't know how involved this gets with that kind of provision and referrals onto those kinds of services that are educational based.
Yeah, I think the kind of from a pathways perspective, kind of what a young person is doing from an education, employment or training perspective is an important aspect of making sure that the kind of the underlying needs are met. And again, I think they'll be limited, but as much as necessary involvement in relation to that. But again, it will be case by case basis as to whether it's relevant or not.
So I know it crops up later on in the slides, but again, so linking into things like the LIFE programme,
Yes.
and those types of programmes that again they're not a formal community resolution disposal, but there are a range of other things that we fund, and I suppose it's I suppose what I'm trying to do is get a little bit more method to the way that we fund some of these things through the community fund and the community safety fund.
And it's what we've been trying to do using the Business Development and Innovation Board under the Local Criminal Justice Board as well, is to, while we've got this group of partners around the table, say that actually we'd like to do that as well. So how can we purposefully direct the community fund and community safety services fund as well to interventions that might be current gaps in the system. So that offer has been made to partners around the table to do that work, but also Nicole is trying to proactively do that work as well.
There's also, I think, another opportunity here, which is with the probation reassessment, shall we say. And and looking at how we link in with the work that the CRC will be commissioning in 2020.
Yeah.
So it's linking in with that because actually we don't want to double up, and we also need to make sure that all of the gaps are filled as well. So that I think is an important piece of work as they go out for us to be able to specify our requirement in North Yorkshire, and then determine between the different commissioning partners who's got responsibility for what.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We've been doing some of that work around things like domestic abuse perpetrator programmes, which there are multiple variants of those programmes based on which cohort you might be trying to work with. And we've been doing some work with the CRC through the domestic abuse whole systems approach funding. And again, thinking about what are the different needs of our cohorts across county and city, and thinking about commissioning those services to meet the different needs of cohorts. So that we've got models that we can use that means, again, you're not replicating services, but you are focusing on the needs in our area and trying to cater to those.
I suppose, I mean, we're going to have to do a piece of work prior to the CRCs being recommissioned by the MOJ. You've essentially got 3 core key cohorts, haven't you? Men, women and young people. Across North Yorkshire, what is our requirement around rehabilitation for those core sort of cohorts? And what do we do? And what does the probation service do? Well, both bits of the probation service. And how do we coordinate all of that? And at the moment we haven't defined what our ask is.
Yeah.
So we've got quite a big piece of work to do, I think, to define that between now over the next few months.
Yeah, and I think it's some of the conversations we've started again through the Business Development and Innovation Board, which is what are our needs, because both the Community Rehabilitation Company and the National Probation Service in our area do have an understanding of that, because they have pathways assessments for all of the individuals on their caseload. So whilst we don't get that information on a regular basis in terms of what is the need in North Yorkshire for our current offenders, that information is sitting there with the CRC and NPS, and we should be able to utilise that to...
So they are saying that in West Yorkshire they are providing that information at the moment, so we need them to extend that to North Yorkshire.
Yeah, so that I think they're using a new tool from a CRC perspective, aren't they? And they're testing it in West Yorkshire. We've asked to be included in that pilot as soon as we possibly can, but at least they will understand what that pilot is giving West Yorkshire and see how it can be utilised.
Well, so having spoken to people recently, I think it's helping a lot.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll try and get.
But so I think this is really crucial, particularly as we approach the developments in the CRC, because if they've got information around their cohort that we don't have, and we've got one pot of money across Yorkshire and the Humber, they're going to be in a much better position to define what they need than we are.
Yeah, and I think because the data is put into the system in the same way north as it is in west, it should be a relatively easy process to use what they've done, to take what they've done in west and map it onto north. And I think there was an offer definitely from Vicky before she left the BD&I group, and I'll pick it up with Sandra before the next group, which is December.
We've got this new meeting now on the 2nd of November, I think it is, where I think we need to really develop this idea, because we need there is talk around trying to provide some analytical capability as well to help us do this, which I think would be quite useful.
Really good.
We might have to pay a bit for it, but if we combined the cost of it, then it might be additional capability. So I think we need to take this a little bit outside of the LCJB and look more regional. I mean, it's a very big CRC area, but at least it is coterminous in a way that it currently isn't.
And it will be a smaller geography than the current geography that we've got in our contract package area.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just more people.
Yeah, more people, less geography to cover. Okay. So the next portion of my slides goes on to the North Yorkshire Youth Commission. So again, I won't go into the detail of each of this, but just to tell you kind of something around what the North Yorkshire Youth Commission is. So the purpose is to enable young people to support, challenge and inform the work of the Police and Crime Commissioner and North Yorkshire Police, and it's around the North Yorkshire Youth Commission's self-selected 6 priorities. So mental health and vulnerable young people, abusive relationships, hate crime, relationships with young people and police and other authorities, drug and alcohol abuse, missing young people and exploitation. And the North Yorkshire Youth Commission currently comprises around 30 to 35 diverse young people aged 14 to 25 from across North Yorkshire. So in terms of impact over the last couple of years, obviously we've recruited and supported 35 young people to become Youth Commission members. They've identified themselves and as part of the peer research that they've done 6 key priorities which I've just talked about.
Can I just
Yeah.
sorry Jenny, I just want to make it clear. So this
Okay.
is something that we decided we were going to do here in North Yorkshire.
Yeah.
We have commissioned it. I have commissioned it
Yes.
in order to help improve the service given to young people across our county, and they have determined their own priorities around what's important and how they want to work with the police.
Absolutely. Yes.
And do we know how many other areas in the country do this?
It's only a handful in terms of kind of following that model of a youth commission approach.
Yeah.
I know other areas are doing different things, but in terms of youth commission, yes,
Yeah.
we're talking about a small handful of
Yeah.
areas. So in relation to the engagement piece of work that you've just referred to there, Julia, so over 4,000 young people have been engaged through peer research projects, what we've called the Big Conversation, to come up with those priorities, but also do some more of the detailed work around what do those priorities mean and how might we want to work together to deliver against them. So they've shared the recommendations that they've come up with into multi-agency conferences. They've produced a number of short films to raise awareness amongst young people, and then they've continued to actively inform and influence the work of North Yorkshire Police, Police and Crime Commissioner and partners as well. And the bullets there just take you through some of the things that they've been involved in. So
can you give me some examples of what's changed as a consequence of this?
yeah, and I think the kind of some of the key things are the changes in relation to kind of the stop and search thing, the influence on the content of the Connect project work around the mental health training. So the individuals within the Youth Commission have co-designed the work that's gone into that. So actually they've inputted at the front end and changed the way that the format of something like the mental health training through the Connect programme
So,
might look in order to
okay, so let's assume that nobody knows out there what mental health training we're doing. So what mental health training is that?
So this is the training for frontline officers
Yeah.
in order to be able to help them deal with incidents of mental health as they come into contact with individuals who are in mental health crisis. So this is our training in partnership with our mental health community-based provider, TUV, who've helped us develop the Connect project piece of work, which is basically designed the training to try and help officers better deal with instances on the streets. So they've been part of the development work in relation to that training package to make sure that it's focused on addressing the issues that young people might have in relation to mental health.
Can I be a pain in Jenny? What change did they influence in Stop and Search?
I've got to tell you, I think
But
probably
it's-
there,
my
it's-
only
I
worry
don't know
with
what the
these
change
things
to the
is
forms
No.
are.
there's lots of influence
Yeah.
involved in, and we've asked a few times on the sort of concrete changes that they've helped
yeah.
bring about. And sometimes being involved in the process is really important, and it's hard to
Yeah.
pinpoint exactly what did change, but there might be some concrete examples that would be quite helpful.
I'll pick up on that specifically with Nicole in terms of what it was specifically that changed, but I do know that they were obviously involved in forums and kind of consultation
Sure.
events in relation to that. So their input was valuable in terms of that, but in terms of the changes, I'll pick up that.
I think it's also because obviously, I mean, I've had, real opportunity to talk to some of the young people
Yeah.
involved in this, and seeing their personal development through this project has been really quite rewarding.
Yeah.
You know, some young people who really were in quite a difficult place, and through their involvement with the Youth Commission have really grown and grown in confidence and you know, doing things that they never thought that they would do before, and that has been really good to see.
Part of your chief constable recruitment process.
Yes,
Absolutely.
there were,
And
yes.
the
And the
deputies
deputies,
process as
yes.
well,
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. I suppose it is, you know, it's not an inexpensive programme, and it's trying to be able to, you know, the young people themselves are so enthusiastic and they absolutely really love working with the police, but it's really trying to sort of pinpoint specific examples of how they've influenced it and what has changed as a result.
I think some of the things, when you look at so where they're being engaged and brought inside the organisation to have those conversations around stop and search, predominantly the young people that stop and search, and what's the impact? It's about us as an organisation as well, recognising and hearing the voice and the input. So I absolutely accept we're probably going to, how can we say the tangible differences they make, but the very fact that they are taking part in some of these areas of business for us, and they're key areas of business when you look at stop and search, mental health training, the promotion processes of senior officers, whether we record misogyny or not within hate crime. These are some key decisions, and some of these decisions that we're taking as a force are also impacting nationally on the national debates. So actually, so the voice of the young people being heard throughout that design, I think, is really, really important, and that hasn't happened before.
No.
Like a World Mental Health Day, World Mental Health Week, we involved with the Youth Commission around their own voice. An event here last week, I think on Tuesday,
Yeah, they
the
were.
Youth
Yeah.
Commission, which is
They-
great.
They snaffled me downstairs.
Yeah.
It's
Sorry,
just like
there.
it becomes part of
And I
the
do-
conversation.
Yeah.
do you know
You're
what I mean?
absolutely right about all of that, and just to be part of the conversation is a huge step forward. It's just trying to understand the impact they've had, and so that you're right, we're right to say they're involved in, and it's important that they're involved in these things. It's just trying to understand where we can, the actual impact that's had, and if we can't do it, that's fine. But it's just
I think it's from our point of view, from decision making and the work that Al's team do with the Youth Commission as well, and also linking across to other young people around the force through the youth officers that Al's got. It is about actually that they are influencing the way we're making decisions.
Definitely.
We are taking, so again, the key area for us as a force about a change of direction from treating young people as offenders purely and recognising actually that's a symptom potentially, not a root cause, is coming through the voice of the young people as well.
Jim, am I right thinking the Youth Commission are part of the Stop and Search scrutiny panel?
Jenny, do we have any information at all about, now we've got them engaged even slightly, then are we seeing any of that coming through the recruitment figures, be that through specials, regular officers, volunteers?
We've not looked at the kind of the link between that, so we could do though to see whether there's actually been any raise in terms of the time frame. But again, we just need to look at the kind of the analysis of that data.
Certainly in terms of cadets, young people coming through the cadets is the applications are going through the roof. So, you know.
In terms of whether it's been a direct link, it would be very difficult to say whether it's
Be
been
more
a direct
between
link
cadets
anyway.
went to
I mean, I have to say, I mean, it's interesting because I've got children at school in this age group, and you know, they've come to me and going, "Oh, why can't we be in it, Mum?" And I'm going, "Well, because you've got a conflict of interest, love." And it is quite a thing that they want to do,
That's
which is
really
good.
positive,
Yeah.
Really positive.
Yeah.
My final slide on the Youth Commission just talks about plans, but there's nothing really that we haven't just talked about. So they continue to engage in subgroups, the engagement and communication side of it from the North Yorkshire Police and the PCC perspective, involvement in the recruitment and training process. We've already talked about the Chief Constable and the Deputy's position, kind of the involvement they had there, and also around community engagement activity, particularly in relation to focusing on underrepresented groups. So there is a plan of action around the next couple of years' work as well.
I was going to say, given it's not inexpensive, what are the plans beyond that?
And I think the intention is, so we've done another piece of commissioning that means we'll go to the end of May 2020 with it as a commission service, but the intention is then for us to work with the organisation, Leaders Unlocked, to transition to a position where it's part of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner going forward, so it is an integral part of the work that you do. Okay. So, first slide is on the new North Yorkshire Police Children and Young Persons Strategy. So this links into the Youth Commission from our perspective, because obviously the Youth Commission were quite heavily involved in developing the strategy. So the new strategy was launched in January, developed in collaboration with the Youth Commission and others, and it contains a forward from them. It's based around the national strategy, the Youth Commission priorities and the Police and Crime Plan. Promotes a force-wide focus on developing and promoting and embedding key areas of work to support young people in partnership with those young people, helps put young people's opinions at the centre of development work related to them, so it gives them a voice. In terms of the delivery plan priorities, they're informed by the North Yorkshire Youth Commission as well as informing the main strategy. And that's come out of the recommendations work and the priority work. The delivery plan identifies North Yorkshire Police leads responsible for each area of the strategy, and there's regular monitoring included within the kind of the Commission and Partnerships team, but also with the Youth Commission. All that, so it should say the North Yorkshire Youth Commission, they're not NYCC. And there is joint ongoing work between North Yorkshire Police, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and North Yorkshire Youth Commission to monitor the delivery of that strategy as well.
That's important. Yeah.
And Jenny, does that have a relationship with the NPCC youth portfolio, Olivia Pinckney's portfolio?
Yeah. I think it is from NYP perspective.
Still our thunder.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny.
That's it from me.
Okay, shall I crack on?
Yep.
Okay, so my slides are going to be a follow-on from Jenny's. We've already talked about the local children and young person strategy, so I'm going to focus on the national children and young person action plan 2016 to 2018. The national lead is Olivia Pinckney, as Claire's just alluded to. So there's two key principles. If we go on to the next slide, that's a massively complex slide, which just goes to show really the different work streams for the national plan. It is a huge piece of work, it really is, and I'm conscious that it says it to 2018. I would imagine that will continue for a long period of time. And having heard Olivia Pinckney speak, she is absolutely passionate about children and young people.
Recently.
So, do you know then, Al, if the view is to sort of make it 2018 to 2020, if you know what I mean, rather than redo a huge piece of work?
I think all the key areas are still really relevant, and we're still working towards them. So the principles are that the vulnerability is identified and responded to effectively in order to protect them from harm, and it's about how children having their own voices. So the priority areas, as you can see in blue, are Stop and Search, which is led locally by Fiona Willey, Chief Inspector in the Operational Proactive Policing World. So there's a subgroup held within that with the North Yorkshire Youth Commission members who help advise renew Stop and Search forms. And it talks about here, perhaps alludes to what Jenny, what we're trying to say about the changes to the form, is that it gives a better explanation of the rights and the process on the form, which is what probably the children were after. Because I think coming from an operational world, when you do undertake Stop and Search, I think some of that grounds object and the entitlement is probably not as well explained on the street to young people, which probably leaves a little bit of an unsavoury taste maybe, you know, as part of that engagement. And that's about building trust. And then you've got children in care, which is a massive one, which we've talked about around the previous slides, which is the plan over for that is Owen Harder, and that's a joint North Yorkshire and North Yorkshire Police, NYCC and NYP protocol, which we reviewed and adopted in December 2017. So that focus is being not to criminalise young people in care, and that's in line with the national protocol and the Lord Layman report. So it's about raising awareness that the responsibility of the carer being similar to that of the parent and guardian. Better sharing of information between children's homes and police partners, agencies, the VAT and the MAST process. And I know Alan's been working pretty tirelessly with some of the children's homes down at the sort of south end of the ground. Certainly when I was Deputy Commander at York, we did a great deal of work with some of those children's homes.
Just to explain, Commissioner, for the public, in terms of the VAT are our vulnerability assessment team that operates in York as a multi-agency team doing that assessment of vulnerability and risk, and the MAST are the multi-agency safeguarding team that do the same equivalent in County Hall up here in Northallerton.
So are they what in other areas would be MASHs?
Yes, they are essentially similar to multi-agency safeguarding hubs that will be known about other forces, yes.
So just out of interest, why have we got a MAST and a VAT and not a MASH?
It's just agreeing with our local partners terminology that also assist them with their staff. Commissioner.
It doesn't mean that we're missing people out of the...
We're not missing anybody out.
Right,
It's
okay,
just
good.
supportive terminology to support
Right.
our partners.
Right, fine, okay. I have visited the VAT and they do great work.
Yeah.
They're really good, fantastic officers.
But they've just received a favourable report from the joint assessment down in the City of Cork as well.
And I think they were honoured in our awards.
They were.
Yes.
And then we've got the custody detention strand, which is delivered by Ed Noble and Chief Inspector John Dwyer from the Criminal Justice Role. So
Does that include Section 136 detention? So Section 136 and
I think it covers a variety of strands in terms of it looks around Section 38 overnight detentions. It talks about the crisis, the children's concordat aspect of the plan. But I think we are quite well developed there in terms of what we've got in place with criminal justice. We have whilst we have the Youth Outcomes Panel, we have a working group set up with Steve Walker where we review every single child that comes into custody to just ensure whether they have been supported, whether they was held in custody overnight, but it was right to do so, and accommodation was looked at with EDT and other partners, just to make sure that every aspect of that was covered before we then made that decision to remand that individual in custody.
So we'll be able to see from the last quarter of data from further performance back that we haven't had any young people detained under Section 136 Mental Health Act in our police custodies.
no. Do you do? Because I know you review every Section 136 detention as well, regardless of where they go, be that place of safety or custody. Because we still detain under 18s under Section 136. Do they get reviewed?
Well, I'm not privy to the meetings anymore because I'm obviously not in criminal justice, but without doubt they would be over by the time that comes to the notice of the criminal justice management in the morning. That's been scrutinised.
And then linked to it, and you might be coming to it, so forgive me, we've had the odd need longer term detention for cases that require custody. We've struggled sometimes to get places.
Mental health, you mean in terms of forensic beds, etc.
More secure accommodation.
Yeah, forensic
forensic
sort of
bed, yeah.
settings. Not often.
No, exactly.
It's
Which is
very,
one of the
very
problems,
rare,
I
but
think, sure.
I think we still do have those significant challenges, and we've got an escalation process between the superintendents now for people that are likely to be, certainly when we're coming up to that 24-hour period, there should be a number of triggers that are featured, and all the superintendents have got those policy guidelines sent to them, so that if it's looking that way, then we talk to individuals in health to make sure that we are progressing that onward transmission of the bed or identification of the bed, because we have had it a number of times in the past.
Leanne Connells, the head of criminal justice, has been working with local authorities to ensure that we're able to look at secure accommodation as opposed to remanding into police custody.
Yeah.
Another question, appropriate adults.
Yes.
So how are we for children in specifically? Availability.
Well, there is a statutory report.
I know there is. Timeliness, availability.
Julia, I haven't had any negative
Good.
Right, now that's not to say that it's not happened, but it hasn't come to me.
Right.
And Sarah Sanderson and Neil Northend would raise that with me.
Right, good.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, Julia, but if this was significant or an issue, either in North Yorkshire or York, that would come to my notice, and,
Okay.
and myself and Leanne would have a conversation about that.
Further reassurance, sort of a byproduct, I guess, of the work we've done on appropriate adults with vulnerable adults would imply we're not as bothered about the children's side of it, because we've not been spending the years we've been trying to improve the service for vulnerable adults. We've been doing both together, if we were.
Yes, and it also demonstrates the effectiveness of a statutory requirement,
Yes,
doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which,
And this
yeah.
and this was covered. I certainly had an input with the criminal justice custody officers training CPD, continued professional development that took place last week, and I know that Inspector Ogden did deliver inputs around EDT and appropriate adults to the custody cohort of sergeants and detention officers, so it is continually being delivered in terms of that importance, and the Section 38 detentions overnight for remand.
The really difficult bit is it's impossible to know from data is, are you choosing the most appropriate adults? So often family members are called on to be appropriate adults. Oftentimes that's appropriate, sometimes it isn't. So knowing how appropriate the appropriate adult is really difficult.
If they're witnesses or they're victims, they cannot be appropriate adults to the offences. So that's already built into the case, and that's really clearly identified by ourselves. I think the problems, the challenges come from children's homes when the offences are committed in children's homes. That's because invariably the tutors or carers are witnesses. And this becomes a real, that's perhaps where there is a disparity in terms of time for children that are already looked after and may be disadvantaged. Okay, so and then we've got engagement and relationship, which is delivered by Sarah Sanderson and Neil Northend, who you know very well. There's various programmes in place that are led by NYP. We've got the fantastic Crucial Crew, Lifestyle, and we assist with the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue life courses, volunteer police cadets, work with the Prince's Trust, all sorts. There are a great deal of fantastic opportunities for children in North Yorkshire Police and York. And we talked on there about World Mental Health Day, which I've already spoken about. We also talk about mental health, and Julie, you'll be aware of it around Compass Buzz and the opportunities that we talked about at the Crisis Care Can Call That meeting, a texting service that's available for children that are struggling mentally, and that people can call or put a text message into their phone to Compass Buzz, and somebody will respond and engage with them at their end, which is a fantastic service.
That's only in North Yorkshire, then,
North
isn't
Yorkshire,
it?
absolutely, yeah.
And just in terms of engagement, that'd be kind of this also, forgive me, but just the expansion of the work experience programme. So you had two in your office, Julie, that were brilliant, two brilliant kids, but you know, you see them more and more, and I know some of the places are not allowed to go, so the legal services can't host them at the moment because of sort of the work they're doing there, but they are looking to be able to do that. So I think that's one only sort of improvement to that programme.
Mm-hmm. And then we've touched on, with Jenny's presentation, youth offending and consultation, which I wouldn't want to go into any further unless...
Simon?
Gosh, hang on, what's happened? It stopped again? How do I get rid of that middle bit?
TV, isn't it?
So if we move on to youth engagement, prevention and early intervention. So what we do, okay, so we have 4 youth officers.
Can I just be a pedant? Really sorry. Did you notice it? Yeah.
What have I done?
On the Crucial Crew brochure on the front it says an urban adventure. So is that national material?
If it needs changing, I shall change it.
It just seems an odd thing to for North Yorkshire. Anyway. No, sorry.
That's right. Right, okay, so I'm off my stride now. So.
I apologise, I did warn you.
No, fine. So, self-explanatory really. So I know it's a bit of a busy slide really, but essentially, yes, we do have 4 dedicated youth officers. We have a gap at Scarborough and Rydal. We have Harrogate and Craven, which is Paul Stevenson, a police staff member. Hamilton Richmondshire, we have PC Andy Collinson. York and Selby, we have Sarah Jane Elliott. And Scarborough and Rydal, we currently have a vacancy which has been in place for some time. We are working to fill that gap. It's a challenge for me because the way in which my department and safeguarding is changing and the changing needs of children, I want to make sure that what we put in place in terms of those the profile of the skills of that individual, whether it needs to be a police staff member or a police officer, that it's future-proofed in terms of disclosure, ability to investigate, etc. So there's some real challenges there because obviously sexting, CSE, CCE challenges. I want to make sure that what we do put in place is right with the staff associations, the federation, and the needs of our young children. So it has been a gap, Julia, for a while.
Does that apply to the other 3 roles as well then, Al? Is that role being...
The role is being looked at. I've spoken to Mr. Kane some months ago now, or a month or so ago, because this needs to be absolutely right. We need to make sure that what the youth officers, and they deliver a fantastic job now, don't get me wrong, absolutely brilliant, but the changing face of safeguarding and partnership work, we just need to make sure that their skills and the type of person or the skills required for that role will future-proof us in terms of what they need to be able to do.
I presume we can look elsewhere for that, what others have done in that respect.
We've done that environmental scanning, the horizon scanning, with similar forces. And we've got a good flavour. We've got a role profile. It's going through our human resources team at the moment just to make sure that what we put in place is right in terms of the content, and that will be put to Mr. Kane and the staff association just to make sure that we've got those right milestones in place. And I need to do that ASAP.
So can I just, because obviously at the moment it is the early intervention and support that they focus on, isn't it? And I mean, and I've been, particularly in the area where I live, to some sessions that have been run by the team and all of the rest of it. And I suppose I understand the needs around vulnerability and safeguarding. It's the balance between that and this early intervention and engagement that is important. And what I haven't got from these slides, I suppose, is how these 4 youth officers link with your neighbourhood teams and the work that they do in schools and in other community settings. So it's trying to understand how they work in the round with their colleagues.
So the bigger picture obviously is to bring safeguarding and partnership hubs together or into the community safety hubs. So for me, and this is something that we need to talk through in terms of the location of our youth officers, because for me they should be embedded into the community safety hubs, working alongside the community safety officers and partners, so that those conversations we have around vulnerability becomes normal, and that we have those conversations in the round rather than it comes through different avenues. If we're talking the same language and trying to protect people early intervention wise and prevention, that those conversations happen in one place.
Okay, so this, I suppose, just this is again, it's what they're there to do, isn't it? Are they there to identify individuals who are at risk, and to intervene early, and/or are they there to provide broader prevention and education work? You see what I mean? There's a difference in their roles.
I think this is why we're really close to planning and skills development commissioner, because I think the latter is their bread and butter work. Looking at doing that broader prevention.
Because I wouldn't want to lose that. It is really important.
That is important, and that is their bread and butter. But if we're engaging the right children and young people, they will be those then that enter into that programme that will require some safeguarding and some focused intervention prevention work. What we want is those youth officers to have the skill sets to pick up on that. So whilst they're doing the broader stuff, they absolutely should be able to hone in on, so Phil Kane's come into that programme, actually I'm worried about what's happening at home with Phil. We need to make sure that we pick up on that and we divert and get the right skills in place. That's why we need to tie them closely to the safeguarding teams and the community safety teams. But yes, absolutely, bread and butter, broad range, but with the skill set to pick up and identify those issues.
Because also we do know, obviously, as well, that the vulnerability it can be, any child can be vulnerable regardless of their background, you know, all of the rest
and
of it.
it could be a point in time.
Exactly. So it's by necessity it's a very broad brush
Yes.
approach.
Yes.
And it does link with the day-to-day work of PCSOs and
Yes.
all of the rest of it. And I do worry. I think the youth officers are clear around, you know, what it is they do, but I do worry whether or not we've got a systematic approach amongst neighbourhood teams and more broadly around how we engage with schools and young people and in setting.
And this is why I think we've got to do this around a place-based
Yes.
public safety approach,
Yes.
which will take us through the pilot in the area that we're looking at, because that's how we should be joining all this together.
Yes, which actually didn't come into the conversation we
It
had.
didn't. I noted it.
Yes.
With,
And will those youth officers
Well, it
engage,
sort of did. Yeah.
not necessarily on each and every visit, but with local S&T cops and PCSO? So when I've been on patrol before, one of the S&T constables knew that school inside out, so it was on results day, and we went down to the school, and on the way there he passed I don't know how many kids from 4 upwards, and knew everybody's name, they all knew his name, you know, knew them backwards. He'd be told stuff that no one else, he would say no one else would get told, and then somewhere else, you know, the PCSOs would go around and didn't quite have that same information, and weren't sometimes reporting things that weren't necessarily being understood.
Yeah.
So
you might
schools officers will brief on with some of the neighbourhood policing teams and the response teams. The PCSOs sometimes will accompany the youth officers into schools to deliver classroom education or some safeguarding inputs to individuals, and lifestyle. Crucial Crew is delivered with youth officers, PCSOs and volunteers. So there is that blend with the neighbourhood policing teams, but I think there is, in terms of the language and the early intervention and the ACEs and all the conversations that we have, I think there is something about the place where the youth officers come on and off duty and just becoming part of the fabric of a community safety partnership.
Yeah, I think at the moment it's on the fringes and we're not to make it mainstream. So lifestyle is a classic example where the youth officers will build the lifestyle programme each year, but then they'll reach out to all the PCSOs and the neighbourhood officers to go out into the schools and promote it, and they're relying on their contacts to make sure that actually they are going to seek out some key individuals within the areas that they know that would particularly benefit from doing lifestyle. So that's why we've seen some particular successes over the Eastfield area in Scarborough, because actually it's about those PCSOs knowing there's children there that needs help there. And actually some of the stuff, that's where they've encouraged some of the teachers and others to take part in lifestyle, be the supervisory adults.
And obviously, I mean, we do get information from our partners around the schools where, you know, more support is needed.
Yeah.
And it is, you know, making sure that's in place, but not. I mean, it's a lot of schools and a lot of children to get around, so you do have to prioritise. But not all of it can be face to face.
No, and where you see that working really well was the example where PCSO Smith got the award the other night for the engagement that she put into the Thailand school for the issues that they faced. So really, really good, strong engagement.
Have you got harder with the changes to education academies and the different structure?
That's not something I've got knowledge of, Will, to be fair. I can take that back and try to understand that, but I don't have anything that's come to me to say that that's changed the dynamics of it.
Because we've tried to engage with governors, for example, and once upon a time I think they were all relatively sort of easy to contact via local authorities. Now they're all under sort of their own arrangement.
I mean, some of the projects or pilots that we've done around Optivan, around knife crime and some of the early identification of people that are at risk, we've seen no kickback from any schools or academies. It is, do you know what, we need some help, come in and help us out, and it's been really well received. So it's certainly nothing in terms of kickback that I've had.
I mean, hand in hand would say that they get a different attitude from different schools, but I don't think it's necessarily down to their status as an academy or
Just
not.
the leadership.
It's yeah.
A perception of whether something is happening or not.
I think parent governors are an under-engaged, important group of people, but trying to find out who they are is pretty impossible, because they, I think they would be particularly engaged around some of this stuff, but trying to get to them with communications, we've tried many a time and failed, because the list just doesn't exist, as far as we know anyway. Because they can challenge the schools from within as well.
Yeah.
So our youth team have 2 Twitter accounts, Youth Team NYP and NYP Lifestyle. What I don't know, Commissioner, is how many hits and how many times we've responded, but that's a key focus for neighbourhood policing development for us, is about increasing our online footprint and how we engage with some of our communities.
Digital PCSOs.
Looking at that now, I spoke to Mr Kane a couple of weeks ago in terms of that as part of developing neighbourhood policing. We are looking at that over in Scarborough to take that forward. There's a little bit of a training requirement on that in terms of how
Sure. But that would seem to be an obvious way into engaging people in a different way.
I think the bit for me, there's different levels of approach. The digital PCSO is a more focused skill set requirement, but your more mainstream social media activity on neighbourhood policing doesn't require that. I think as we roll out the mobile phones from a technology point of view, my ask from Alan and the team is I would expect to see a lot more engagement through resident Facebook sites, through Twitter activity, through social media from our general neighbourhood policing teams. So I think digital PCSO, yeah, absolutely for a focused, narrow remit, but broader it needs to be. This is technology that everybody's using every day in their lives. So this is not something that's new.
No, I totally agree with that, but I suppose, for example, not community or industry I'm at all familiar with, but for example, a digital PCSO could get in the nitty-gritty of the gaming community and be online and
absolutely.
which are regular.
Where you've got that focused approach, absolutely.
That's what I mean.
For
It's
your
an
general
untapped community.
neighbourhood police, it's no different for me than going to a community meeting face to face than actually engaging with that community online through your Facebook. So we should be doing more of that.
So it's interesting because we talked about this earlier. I was in Tadcaster last night, and really good meeting of a lot of business owners from the town in response to some local issues. And Will and I have talked with Craig Naylor around WhatsApp groups in rural communities. They're going to set up a WhatsApp group amongst the business community in Tadcaster so they can communicate with each other, but we're not engaging in that space with them at the moment. And actually, it might reduce calls to 101. There's a whole range of things that police involvement in a group like that the benefits that could have.
And some cops, I won't say where in case they get in trouble, but some cops do that already, but I think they sort of feel it's slightly off the books.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I don't know how openly it's shared, but certainly things like rural, hence why I was talking to Craig Naylor about it, it's an easy way for a very big geography to be covered, in 10 seconds.
So we've just done a piece of work around trying to map out what our online footprint looks like for North Yorkshire, our community messaging, Facebook, etc. So we can then see where we need to focus our efforts on it, because it would be my vision that neighbourhood policing takes a more predominant role in the performance conferences about holding the commanders to account in terms of how we are managing neighbourhood policing. So that's something that we will be looking at. But they're the 4 key pillars around, maximising I know we're going probably off piece here a little bit, but the volunteers and neighbourhood policing, our ability to problem solve effectively and using the College of Policing to come and test us and then work with us to give us a delivery plan on that. the community safety hub development. So they're the key things, and also maximising our online footprint, which within the partnership hub we are going out. Heidi Lewis, one of my sergeants who set up CMS, or was instrumental in setting up CMS, is going out to local neighbourhood inspectors to really drive a consistent approach of how we deliver our online.
So can I just challenge that a little bit, Al? Because I think a consistent approach worries me a little bit. Because actually, I think there needs to be some consistency around it. But every area has a different online community footprint. So we need an approach around how we use Facebook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But actually, if you look at let's use Tadcaster again, the town council there has got a really, really good community Facebook page, which has loads of people engaging on it, and is a really effective way of communicating with people. And Simon knows my slight obsession with Facebook, and I think we are certainly the OPCC is missing a trick with Facebook, and we're only just starting to use it. What we've found is since we are using it, we are getting more people to our surgeries, we're getting more engagement with local communities, and it is a really effective channel. And I think we've focused a bit on Twitter because it's easy, and actually Facebook is a lot more difficult. You have to be invited into the groups, you have to make a conscious effort to go and engage in a way that you can't just lob a tweet out and hashtag something.
Yeah.
It is a different skill set, but I think it is far more effective.
I think consistent in terms of what's the message we're giving our communities in terms of reassurance. So, for example, mapping or providing some of that assurance around how much time we spent within that community by you perhaps looking at some of the Moors data. So it might be in terms of some of that consistency, some of our neighbourhood policing teams won't factor that in terms of the communications. And also with CMS is developing as well. It will be taken over shortly, and that will give us an opportunity to expand the capability of CMS to a two-way function. There's some challenges with that because we're then going to have to resource that, you know what I mean? But it can't be just a one-way message all the time. It's about communication.
Conversation works. How many young people are on CMS? And young people using Facebook less and less.
Well, this is where it's about understanding the demographic, isn't it?
Which is why I took my game, because there's a whole, and there's loads of vulnerability and crime there. From what I
So
understand.
part of the neighbourhood team, I'd expect the local neighbourhood team to understand demographics of their community, and if we are actively looking at online engagement, then we should know from that what's the best platform. It shouldn't be us dictating the platform, it should be the community telling us what platform they use and we partake in that.
Or would it be Snapchat?
Instagram is the word.
Snapchat, just obsessed with it.
So Crucial Crew, North Yorkshire. I'm sorry, I'm reading some of this off some of the information here. North Yorkshire Police have helped deliver Crucial Crew safety workshops to the Year 6 pupils across the county for over 20 years, with the support and assistance of key partners such as the Fire and Rescue Service, Ambulance Service, the RAF, electricity providers, IDAS, Bernardo. Some real interesting, having been to, I don't know whether anybody's. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's some of the some of the looks on some of the kids' faces is just was worth every moment, really, and the passion that the likes of Sarah Jane, who I've seen deliver it, really passionate about it. So it's very much self-funding. They charge about £1.50 per head, and it's with cadets, volunteers, PCSOs, and it's.
My kids still remember it. And I said, well, they said, what are you doing this week? Mum, I said, I'm going to Crucial Crew. Oh, we love Crucial Crew. I mean, it leaves a big impact on people.
It's got everything.
And did you hear about the little boy who saved his mum?
No.
As a consequence of it, yeah. So the fire safety information that was provided at Crucial Crew helped a little boy save his mum's life.
Wow.
Well, it's been worth it then.
Yeah,
That's
fantastic. Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, just sorry, talking of fire, so the fire service are currently looking at how they use Facebook, and I just wonder whether or not there's an opportunity for the police and the fire service to sort of collaborate around that. because we'll all be trying to engage in the same community spaces in communities, so that might be worthwhile.
Okay, I'll link Heidi up, and Alex is obviously doing some of the work
Yeah.
around emergency services. Okay, so our youth officers oversee workshops all across the county, all throughout the school year. There are 5 2-week events run across the county and City of York throughout, and we engage or reach up to 9,000 Year 6 pupils. So the workshops run over the course of a day and cover those vital safety issues that you've alluded to, Commissioner. So just to give you some stats, since the very first session, approximately 200,000 children have taken part in these sessions. There's also an interactive Crucial Crew game, rather than giving out leaflets and booklets that
An
often would not
urban
get
adventure.
I'll make sure that's okay, and then we talk about Lifestyle Challenge. Over the past few years, North Yorkshire have held Lifestyle Challenge, which culminates in an award ceremony later in the year. Lifestyle Challenge is an activity that gives young people aged 10 to 17 on the 31st of August, I think, who are resident in North Yorkshire, something positive to engage in the summer holidays. It gives the opportunity to make difference in their communities as a team, whilst demonstrating what young people are capable of when they
Must
might
be
have a
coming up,
chance.
is it?
Yeah, it's usually November, isn't it?
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
17 teams last year we had, funded from a number of sponsors, and this year we expect to have around 30 teams.
Oh, excellent. That's
So
good.
it's really good stuff.
Yeah. I'd love the winners last year were fantastic.
And I think, let me just coordinate the next slide.
Can I just ask a question about work experience? Just on so at the moment it's 14 to 15-year-olds. Steve, Thomas and I did a session at York University, and there were some students there, I think, who would be, really be interested in some sort of work experience opportunity. And I do just wonder whether there's an opportunity with our higher education institutions as well as schools.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll send it to that back. I can't answer that at the moment, but
No.
I will sort of tell you about Commissioner.
Because if we can let 14 to 15-year-olds in, one would hope that we might be able to, might be somewhat inundated by students doing criminology degrees.
Well, I think the year internships
Yeah.
were really well received, and we got some great products out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've just had to put a bit of a hold on that just at the moment in terms of the demands that are placed on us elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, because I chaired the last academic board, and I think we had a conversation about interns. We just put a pause on it at the moment whilst we look at what our capability is to support those, because I think there is a demand that is created from and we certainly don't want to take away from it, because we've had some approaches made from York, with around some interns for young people with learning difficulties, and that's from an ex-PCSO that used to work with us. So I just need to make sure that we keep looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously an internship is different to,
We
a
want
couple of
something
weeks
work
work
experience,
experience. Yeah.
We can certainly look at that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think for recruiting diverse people, it could be quite interesting,
Yeah.
because actually you broaden. It allows you to showcase the different types of careers and things that you can have within the police service, which people might not necessarily think about. So,
Certainly from York's perspective, we've got
Yeah.
those communities.
yeah.
And there is something on that, because one of the university placements last year was working on rural affairs and was given a range of opportunities whilst they were here, and he wants to become a police officer now.
And I mean, we have had the most fantastic individual in the OPCC who's been just
Yeah.
brilliant.
We've kept him.
Yeah, yeah,
Last time.
yeah, we have. Yeah.
And well, the two work experience that we had, I organised to go and see legal because they both want to be loitering involved and they want to be police lawyers.
Yeah.
Who knows whether that'll happen, but just that few hours with the legal team who's gave it their time to do that was really good.
Okay. Right, so I think moving on to North Yorkshire Police Cadets.
Can I just want to say something. The last cadets event I went to was with you, Phil, and it was brilliant,
It
and
was.
you did a fantastic job, and it was great.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
really good.
It was brilliant. It was in Phil's old school. It was really something. It was great.
So, nationally recognised uniformed youth group throughout the UK. The purpose of the volunteer police cadets is not to recruit police officers for the future, but to encourage the spirit of adventure, good citizenship amongst its members. This is a bit of a forward, really. We believe that every young person deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of his or her background. These are Neil Lancey's words. He's really passionate about this. We encourage young people from all backgrounds to join the VPC, including those who may be vulnerable to influences of crime and social exclusion. And also includes people with learning difficulties as well, which we've recruited in the last intake, I believe. So, I think I'm not doing this very well, actually. So, the aims of the volunteer police cadets is encourage the spirit of adventure and good citizenship, inspiring young people, promote a practical understanding of policing, engaging with young people, support local policing priorities through volunteering and giving young people a chance to be heard, and the strapline of be safe and feel safe.
Can I just mention, I happened to be at the awards ceremony, sat next to the High Sheriff, and he was talking about the possibility of engaging some of the police cadets in some of the work that he does, and it might just be worthwhile contacting him.
I think we focused on that.
Have you?
I think we focused on that in the slides.
Do we?
Commissioner
I have
Ward.
read the slides.
Um,
Maybe I haven't.
Maybe I've misinterpreted them.
Sheriff.
The High Sheriff. No, so that's about the public recognition of
Right.
the cadets, as opposed to them getting involved in the High Sheriff's work.
Right, okay. Okay. I know the High Sheriff was there with, at the last, I think the past announced ceremony.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think
Which
he's
I was
going to another
present
one,
for.
isn't he?
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
been involved. I've done
Yeah.
it.
I think he's keen.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So the scheme is open to young people aged between 14 I'm not really good with these. It's started to click differently now, so
Because of
hang on, I'm just going to try and get it all up on the screen first. So North Yorkshire Police Cadets, its scheme's open to young people aged between 14 and 16. So what's involved? Okay, so cadets meet for 2 hours on a weekday evening during term time, and this will include, as it says on the slide, drill, physical activities and exposure to guest speakers. They also get involved and meet different departments within the police service, such as local policing teams, dog section, firearms unit, major crime scene investigations. And do you know, having been involved in a major exercise down at one of our shopping outlets, where we had a tabletop exercise with firearms officers, the cadets and family and leaders were involved in acting as stooges. It just created a real sense of reality for the firearms commanders and the teams. That's how they really get involved with us, and they're really well respected by other teams.
Have they ever done sort of mystery shopping stuff for us? Because I know they do in other cadets services, don't they? They're going to off licenses that might be selling stuff cheap and all of the rest of it.
I don't think we've ever used them for that.
Yeah, there's
Commissioner.
certainly they do in other cadet schemes, along
To do
with
test-
trading
To do
license.
test purchase. don't
Yeah,
they?
yeah,
Trading standards have been keen to do
Yeah.
that for ages. So they'll
yeah.
like that, I'm sure.
I think that's a question that's well worth asking.
Yeah.
About,
They certainly do, because I went to an event in London and the cadets there that won that particular event, they'd been involved in the whole programme of that in London.
Right. Okay.
Is that the Ferries Awards?
No, it was something to do with the High Sheriff, one of our previous High Sheriffs. They used to have, do you remember the High Sheriff used to have national awards?
Yeah.
And it was something to do with that.
Yeah, someone you could
Mm.
Yeah.
have a look at.
Sorry, I didn't just go on about high sheriffs, I just men in tights. Fortunately, he wasn't wearing them.
Right, so again, just to talk about the activities that they are involved with, you talk about assisting with local community events, assisting local policing teams with crime prevention initiatives, first aid skills, learning new problem solving, leadership and communication skills, role play for NYP training. And as I said, I mentioned the designer outlet training event. Eggborough Power Station was another event they were involved with. They assist the neighbourhood policing teams with crime prevention, letter drops, property marking, community safety events. They assist local communities, Scarborough, Rydal, Keep Safe Roadshow, Tour de Yorkshire, Armed Forces Day, Richmond Triathlon. They did all these events and provided a real visible support to those organisations. And the next slide talks about our current units. So 3 units on the board there, Catterick, Scarborough and York. Catterick Garrison opened in 2017 with 20 cadets, 6 leaders, and they're based at Risdale Sports and Community College near Hipswell and Catterick. Scarborough opened in 2016, re-recruited in 2018 with 28 current cadets. We've got 5 leaders, cadet leaders over there, and based at the Scarborough Tech on Farley Road. And in York, which opened in 2015, again re-recruited in 2017 and 18 to factor in boost numbers due to 18-year-old leavers. We've got currently 22 cadets there, 18 cadet leaders, and that's based at Askham Bryan College, which is where they hold the ceremonial events for us as well. I'm going to touch on the fact that we have a bid in for some additional cadets. I think it's the Early Intervention Fund. I think we put some funding forward for with Devon and Cornwall. I think Nicola Hutchinson is working on that with us. Nicole, sorry. To set up a 4th unit there, which will be fantastic. Okay, so in terms of the impact, applications for new recruits have increased for each campaign, showing there is a desire more than ever for young adults to be involved with North Yorkshire Police cadets. North Yorkshire Police departments are continuing to be more aware of cadets and what they can offer and how they can assist. So neighbourhood policing teams regularly include the cadets in property marking, as I said, and the crime prevention events and road shows with the volunteers as well. All North Yorkshire Police Cadets units are continuing to be recognised more and more in their respective local communities. They're being offered more opportunities to help and engage at local community events. The major highlight is the Mayor of Scarborough has chosen an NYP cadet as his cadet representative for his mayoral year. The High Sheriff of North Yorkshire is also a supporter of the North Yorkshire Police Cadets and has agreed to recognise the cadet achievements with the High Sheriff Award, and he will show his support at relevant future events, as I understand, and that's from Neil as well.
2 questions are. One is, well, maybe for you, Jenny, is what engagement is there between the cadets and the Youth Commission, if there needs to be, and how do they, the cadets might be able to put some of that feedback into practice. I don't know. There seems to be a link there that might need to be explored a bit further.
I can't answer that, I don't know, but I will certainly find out. It will either be Neil Northend that could tell me that off the top of his head, or me.
It might not be, there is crossover, but instinctively there's something there. The other is do we have any understanding of the domino effect of having a group of cadets in a school? So all those that aren't involved, and I've been to passing out ceremonies, and there's twins who've got too jealous of the other twin who isn't. There's people. As Judy says, there's people who are really keen to get involved in it. What impact does it have on the wider school to have a group of kids who are in the cadets and doing all this stuff?
I would also add families, because certainly the pride that the families have in their kids doing this is really, really good. It's really great.
You can see that in the audience.
It's fantastic. And sometimes families are not necessarily naturally engaging with the police, shall we say, and that I think is a really good thing as well.
Yeah.
So I know the principal at Rysdale School is really keen to push the police cadets every opportunity he gets, every award ceremony he gets, he pushes that. And again, given that that is in the centre of a military garrison, the fact that they're running with police cadets is really positive for us as well.
Yeah.
I just wonder, there's something, you know, it will be having an impact on what the
You
kids
mean
who
a
are
positive
in it. Yeah,
impact,
sure, sure.
or the fact that I didn't get in, so
No, positive impacts, I'm sure. And they'll hear, you know, I did this thing at the weekend with the High Sheriff, or, you know, I was helping the Mayor with his something or other. And it'll have a positive impact, I'm sure. But, you know, we probably don't go beyond the group that are actively involved in the cadets to ask.
I think the fact we're seeing more people looking to apply
Exactly.
and join
shows.
Exactly. But
it is
apart
really good. One of the areas I think for us to consider potentially is actually you're seeing the cohort that are younger than the ones that are able to come into the cadets asking can they join. And I think there's something for us to probably look at in terms of actually are any of those then joining when they're old enough, or have we missed an opportunity and they moved on to something else because they can join that soon? So
Is it
that's-
Humberside that's got a big mini cadets scheme?
Durham, Homestead, there's a few
Yeah,
forces
there
like
are,
that,
aren't they? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
and don't forget
monitoring-
some of these kids are on the fringes of going
sure.
out, you know, off the rails, I think, and actually this gives the discipline and the structure and the commitment. Really fantastic individual. Obviously you've been to these events and you go to the passing out ceremony and these kids are absolutely focused,
Yeah.
you know, smart in their uniforms, their families are beaming. It's incredible. But I will find out, Will, because I
Well,
think
if we
there's
won't
some
have any
interesting-
figures on it, it's more just sort of,
What
is
it-
it
what it
worth
feels
trying to
like.
find out, and as
Yeah.
Julia says with the family as well, you know, what impact does it have, that, you know, seeing a different side of policing maybe.
Yeah.
It's being supported well nationally too. I think that it's something in the region of £2 million has been drawn down from police transformation over the last couple of years. They have an ambition to be up to something like 20,000 by 2020. And the connection with Devon and Cornwall is the chief in Devon and Cornwall is the national lead.
Yeah. Is that the £2 million from the early intervention fund, or is that
Different.
is it
Transformation.
different?
Yeah.
Is it? Right, okay.
Yeah, there won't be any more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just thought I'd get the good news in before it evaporates.
So, anyway, right, okay. So we talked about the future, and so maybe a little bit presumptuous really to put all that on their Harrogate unit for 2019, because I don't think it's been agreed. I don't think we've secured the funding as yet. I'm going to be brave and say that we put that on there as a Harrogate unit for the future. So as planned, rollout for NYP cadets would be the next location at Harrogate. This would fulfil the need for a west side of North Yorkshire having a cadet unit. Harrogate College have been approached and they are very keen to be involved and use the college as a venue for 19. Originally there were plans of opening a Selby cadet unit. Whilst it still could be the case, there's been no real immediate demand for a cadet unit in that particular area at the moment, but it is developing all the time. However, there has been a desire from individual NYP officers for a unit in Malton, and various members of the public seem keen for a unit in Skipton. Both of these areas will be considered and suitable venues would need to be sourced. So that's really early days, really.
And the college in Skipton.
Sorry, Commissioner?
The college in Skipton would be an obvious one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably tie into some of the other work that we're doing within the partnership hub.
Yeah.
The cadets are currently working with the NYPCC office in supporting National Volunteer Police Cadets secure funding, which is what we talked about. The proposal would see funding for around $325,000 to help forces across the country open new cadet units, and £300,000 for delivery of training, development and support for participating cadet units to be enabled the cadets and volunteers to deliver social action projects, which is something that we're hugely interested here in North Yorkshire. So each unit continues to operate a sensible number due to the turnover and availability of volunteer cadet leaders. In the past, cadet nights have had to be cancelled due to some of the leader availability. A major factor in this is the shift pattern change for officers who are also cadet leaders. I think that's been a consideration. More volunteer leaders would definitely be required at each existing unit. Cadet leader applications will be advertised externally for the first time, which is what we're seeking to do, and will be implemented like a PSV role, Police Staff Volunteer role. So recruiting from outside of NYP will bring in fresh ideas and new skills which can be integrated into what we offer our cadets. This would also increase the leader support at events and operations. There then could be a possibility to increase cadet numbers at the existing unit. So we're also, as I say, essentially what we're saying there is that Natasha's team are looking to really maximise what our volunteer cohort is, to increase the numbers of our existing cadet facilities and increase some of those further sites. So when cadets leave due to their age, they're being given the option of staying as volunteer leaders, thus increasing leader numbers, as we just alluded to. Immediate benefits of this way of recruiting are the cadets know the cadet scheme already and can pass on the knowledge to future cadets. Just another point to raise, Scarborough cadets have started a trial of the John Muir Award. This is a UK-wide environmental scheme, a simple structure of 4 challenges, and it just talks about here what those challenges are around discovery, exploration, conservation and sharing experiences. The ambition is clearly to ensure that each cadet unit will continue to do more community engagement events and continue to make a difference in their respective areas. Not sure whether we've covered this. I think this is looping deliveries. Yeah, I think we've covered it, Commissioner.
Yeah.
So I think that concludes my presentation. I
Oh,
believe.
the only question I had actually was on
Your last slide.
the last slide, which was around outcome 21.
Oh, do you know? Sorry, I think I have got a couple more slides. I think. I'll look at this. I think this is.
Got an old version.
Yeah, I think.
We'll talk them through. Leave it on that slide, Al, and we can talk them through.
Right. Okay.
We've done.
Okay, so issues affecting young people in schools and police. I think I have got this one. I do apologise. It just looked familiar to the last one.
Yeah, there's a bit of. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We're there.
So issues affecting young people in schools, young people, risky behaviour. So we've got youth-produced sexual imagery, drugs associated with county lines, and CCE, which is child criminal exploitation, peer pressure, bullying, social media, and that can lead to the use of carrying or threats of use with knives. Schools, risky behaviour, guidance and support of when to report to agencies, police services and the resources to deal with issues in and out of school. Increase in confidence for staff in reporting and dealing internally with incidents, i.e. when it is a crime, and the use of outcome 21. So,
What's outcome 21?
outcome 21 is, I believe, when I think outcome 21 is something that we've used or maximised within schools to kind of allow for schools to be more open and honest, or open and upfront with officers, rather than, do you know what, if they alert the police to a crime, then we are simply going to follow the criminal justice route. Whereas outcome 21 gives us some a procedural justice options really around, you know, what is reasonable, rather than going through a criminal justice outcome. It allows us to deal with it locally and not in the public interest, so that in terms of sexual texting that may not be anything wider than something that just involves school children and nothing more serious than that, but it's dealt with locally and the officers can deal with it proportionately within the schools.
So it is quite controversial for a number of reasons, and I suppose principally, as far as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the police can use Outcome 21 in lieu of a criminal offence. So, but there is the possibility that because it's gone onto police systems, at some point in the future, it might turn up on a DBS check.
Yes.
So even though it's been dealt with as not a criminal offence,
Yeah.
it still gets put down as a recordable something or other,
Yes.
which then may impact on the child's future prospects at some point in the future. And
Like a
I'm
pin.
exactly. So this is where that's where I'm heading. You
Yes.
can, yes.
Yeah.
And my question is, are we heading down that road with it? So how often, and in what circumstances?
So
And as with a pin, sorry to interrupt, Phil,
Yeah.
it's the communication of that. So the problem with a pin was no one really knew. Does it come up or not? What am I accepting here?
So if you do an enhanced DBS check, which is criminal records or a check around somebody's background, these can be revealed, and I think this is where the concern
That's where the
is
controversy
raised.
is. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if I use an example of Operation Hubai, which was the incident that we had recently at Northampton School, where we had 50 to 60 children sending sexual images of themselves to somebody they thought was of their own peer group and the opposite sex, but turned out to be a teacher. Now, the sending of those images, according to Home Office counting rules, means we have to record a crime. I took the decision as the role commander to say, okay, we will comply with recording a crime of sending an image of a child, indecent image of a child, but we will not record a child as a suspect because I believe that child had been duped.
Yes. Exactly.
So we recorded the child under a different category, so that in an enhanced DBS check, that child does not get raised as a suspect. Now you can't make a blanket decision on these, and I think each one has to be taken in its merit. The challenge for us is we have to be compliant with Home Office counting rules, otherwise it looks like we're not recording crime that's taking place, versus what's the life chances of a child. Now we contacted each and every parent in that case, explained what we were doing, and they were happy with what we were doing. But that does mean then that I think we are going to have to give our staff the ability, and this was done with the crime registrar, to enable them to make an informed decision when we're recording the outcome 21 as to what do we record. So it's the crime of it, and what do we record the individual as? Do we record them as a suspect in that crime? Or do we record them as other heading? That's the challenge for us.
I think it's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is a tricky one because
Yeah.
Sometimes they may be sending indecent images of themselves at a time when actually they've already been told and they've had an input into school that that's an offence, don't do it, and they continue to do it. Well, actually, it might be right and proper at that point in time to record them as a suspect. But there were occasions, I think, like the Hubai situation that we had, where it wasn't appropriate to do that. I don't think you can write a blanket policy on it.
So should we just want to talk about the issues with the hins and pins, hins?
Do you mean on the disclosure of those?
Well, so the problem with those was that they sort of leaked out into police practice as far as we could see, and that particularly around domestic situations caused quite a lot of problems. And to the point when actually there's been a recommendation by HMIC, I think, that they should be no longer used.
Right.
Which Phil has accepted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's good because particularly with domestic abuse relationship based circumstances, it was quite difficult. And I suppose it's lessons learned, isn't it, for something like this?
I think they're helpfully different. So I think a PIN was an
Yeah.
easy way out and see
Yes,
it as
it
low
was.
level, whereas I
Yes.
think COPs will see this as always quite a tricky one and
Yeah.
hopefully give it the thought and attention that
I think
it needs.
the challenge for, and again, it came to me as a goal for Operation Abide to make the decision.
Generally
and I
not
was-
sit
and I was-
with
And if that sits with the supervisor, the issue we've got to get through, I think, with our crime registrar is how do we comply with crime recording, given as well we've had the insufficient grading around that, but at the same time take into account the impact on a young person's life, chances going forward. And I think that's something I think we're going to have to work through with the head of crime.
Because one of HMIC's pieces of feedback within the HMIC report was there are disclosures, it might be via a school but often via MARACs and other multi-agency meetings whereby a crime has been essentially shared from another partner to the police and they weren't always getting recorded either. And again,
Yeah, and we've challenged this back to the Home Office and we've challenged this back to, well it was actually Chief Constable Olivia Pinckney that we took this back to, and it was, the Home Office will not budge on their stance in relation to crime recording, so we have to do that, but I think then that comes down to us as a force.
But then if it's recorded as an outcome 21, it can have ramifications later in life.
It will come down to what we
The
record
circumstance.
and what
yeah.
we record the individual as.
Yes.
So if it's an outcome
Yes.
21 and the
Yeah.
individual is recorded as a suspect against that outcome
Yeah.
21,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it will come back. It depends on what we record it as.
and but going back to my, whilst that in itself is a quandary, how is that communicated to the victim/offender, depending on the circumstance? Because one of the challenges with the PIN, and they are different, but one of the challenges with the PIN was it wasn't always clear what it meant. So will this come up? Well, the answer with the PIN is well, it might do. It depends what you're applying for. It depends
Yeah.
if it's relevant to what you're applying for, etc.
I think
It's
it
hard
is
to
because
say.
if you do a standard DBS check, it won't come up. If you do an enhanced DBS check, it will come up. So again, it's a real murky area.
And
so
also
I
it
think
depends
we
what
have
it
to-
is that you're applying to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's
if you're
So
As
if
a
you're
teacher-
working with children and young people and you've got an outcome 21 for sending explicit images,
To your girlfriend who's
do-
doing
when
yeah.
you're a teenager.
Yeah, then that's
and
problematic.
it's an enhanced DBS
Yeah.
check, it will get disclosed.
Yeah.
Yes.
When it's supposed to be a non-criminal outcome.
But there's
However,
also, is there not
there
also
is-
a process within the DBS world where they can decide whether to release that or not? It's
Well,
always a judgment call from a...
There is a judgment call. The element for us though is that when we do a return on a DBS check, we are not saying to the employer, you cannot employ this individual. What we're saying is, here's some information for you to take into account, and it's for you as the employer to make the decision. So again, it's not definitive. Do not employ this individual.
No, I totally understand that, but the reason you can never say is there is subjectivity in the disclosure element of DBS to say, well, I don't think this is quite relevant here, so I won't disclose it.
There is some of that. If that so again, if a requirement to disclose for DBS comes across my desk, then it would be authority of the chief officer to say whether or not we are going to disclose whatever information there. But that has gone through a number of screening processes with our legal team before it gets to that stage.
I don't want to make this too complicated, but I imagine it happens more and more. We'll have the figures somewhere where people can apply to have things removed from police systems. And it's just, again, the understanding to know what is recorded, what can be removed, what, all those kinds of things to make it clear.
I think some, with the inception of youth offending panels now, that gives some real structure to the decision-making process before it gets to a conviction or a charge.
Will
or
these
et cetera.
cases go to a...
Well, I mean, you look at Optivan. Now, the schools would now, because of the engagement of the youth officers, the schools will engage with police officers more at an earlier stage. That child carrying a knife, because subject to CCE or whatever, or county lines, we would only probably get that now later down the line when that individual has committed an offence or made threats with that knife, whereas now with the option and the engagement of the youth officers and the option to have a non criminal disposal, I guess, if that's the right terminology, we can engage with that child at a real earlier opportunity. So whilst it's not ideal to have an outcome 21, what we would know is later down that line, that individual would be far more exposed to CCE or actually get a substantive offence against them or a caution.
It's
I
a
think
really
it's
good
really-
option.
yeah,
I
I
suppose
think
that, I suppose that the likelihood is they'll be used more and more because
think-
this crime is happening.
Yeah, I
well,
think
crime is happening more and more. Therefore, it's just something to be alive to, isn't it?
in short, what we need is a change to the Home Office county. if I'm being honest, that's what we need. We need the ability for that to flex with what society is telling us they want from us at the moment. And at the moment, we don't have that flexibility, other than doing it in the way that I've described.
Which is
Okay.
to record the crime, which is not the offender.
Yeah, but if it's something on the lines of a knife that I was talking about, you've got no choice.
And we've had about 18 or so interventions of children carrying weapons in school,
and they
which,
might
do you
well
know
be a
what, we
victim.
would not have known about until
Particularly-
something more serious.
But they've
Would have
committed
kicked
an
off.
offence, and you're going to struggle then to not record them
No,
as
I
suspects.
totally understand, but often we see the county lines young people being manipulated or
Yeah,
forced to
absolutely.
do things
Yeah.
that.
And it's not just the outcome; it's the intelligence that we're getting with these individuals and the one-to-one engagement at that stage, and actually keeping them within the school system before anything happens. I think it's a fantastic option. But you know, we've seen it with bail, haven't we? We've seen the changes to the bail legislation where people are released under investigation. It's all achievable to change the rhetoric. You know. Anyway.
It also links into something we were talking about last week to Alan Harder, which is how do we work with employers to help them to understand what is disclosed and why and what that involves, because actually that can help them to overcome their fears about potentially employing somebody who does have a flag on a DBS check or an enhanced DBS check, because actually that doesn't always mean they're not suitable for the role that they're applying for.
But then that comes down to things like insurance and
It
all the
does.
rest of it, doesn't it?
And they can make whatever decision they can and use that as a valid reason
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
deciding
It'll
one
be-
way or the other.
You know,
Yeah.
we know that they're likely to take the information from us in a given way, aren't they?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else on that? Thank you for that, Jenny and Al and Phil. We're now on to the stats.
I'll have to slide that.
Slide. It's not a very sliding one.
Not sliding. Okay. So just going on to the first slide around proactivity, I'm just conscious of time,
Yeah.
Commissioner, so I'll whiz through. I just want to highlight on this one, just in terms of the focus that's been given around our proactive policing team around drugs, production, supply and organised crime. So essentially a lot of this is focused around the county lines activity that's been taking place in North Yorkshire. So in total over the report period there's been 138 arrests by the proactive policing team. So that's the roads policing, the operational support unit, the firearms team and the dog section and the rural task force. So that just shows where their focus has been. I think one high profile investigation that's come to a conclusion recently that's been in the press is the conviction of the 3 county lines drug dealers in Harrogate. They were the ones that were responsible for about a year ago for the serious weapons offences in Harrogate that took place and really stood out from the communities there. So really positive engagement, and again still a lot of time and effort going into that area of business.
There's one question I've got on
Yeah.
that one, Phil. That's the FSU and domestic abuse, 80.
Yeah, so essentially what's happened is where they've spent 80 hours in the reporting period on domestic abuse incidents. So what's happened is there could be a number of reasons for that. It could be that our response resources are deployed. So we're using the firearms resources to go and deal with a domestic incident without a firearms authority. So just as another pair of hands.
They
to
still
help us out.
turn up in all their kit though, don't
They
they?
do turn up in all the kit, or there could be that actually there's very often we will get knives
Weapons,
reported at domestic abuse, and it will be a firearms deployment to deal with a domestic situation. So it'll be a mixture of those two.
Okay, all right. So the latter sounds very eminently sensible. The former, if you're a victim of domestic abuse and somebody turns up looking like that and there's no reason for it, could be quite scary.
It is a challenge, Commissioner, I agree,
Yeah.
because they will be carrying a sidearm.
Yeah.
It'll be holstered, but they'll be carrying a sidearm. The challenge for us is that if it's an immediate grade,
Yeah, no, I
we need to get the resources
yeah.
there, and they may be the nearest resource.
Will it be a similar story with OSU and stalking and harassment then? Much less time, 40 hours is not many hours.
So it could be that, or again, because the operational support unit operates a team, what they could be doing is they could be doing a proactive operation around a stalking case.
So I think we have had a member of the public. I think I had, Jenny's gone now, but might have been at when we had Baroness Newlove up. There was, I think, a woman there who had been had a firearms officer turn up to a domestic abuse incident, and that had caused her problems. So I suppose it's obviously a call that you have to make, but
Yeah.
but it has been flagged.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so generally, the force control room will deploy in the first instance a response officer, so an unarmed officer.
Yeah.
Usually the firearms officers, if it's not a firearms related incident we need to go because of a weapons issue, usually the firearms officers will only go because we've run out of response officers, and actually what we're saying is there's a requirement for an immediate attendance, i.e. there could be violence taking place there and then. So you would usually find those 80 hours are either firearms deployments or they're immediate grades where we think there's a threat of safety to somebody and they must go because they're the
So,
only
so
resource available.
in that sense, we don't know how many of those are unavoidably firearms deployments because weapons were.
We don't know, they're not broken down in that time.
But we would, so people who receive the chief officer log every 24 hours, which is of course us, three of us, you can track some of them. So some of those
You
are
can.
Yes,
definitely
that-
those calls,
yes.
but they're apparent on the face of the log.
Yes,
aren't they?
yes, they are.
Yeah, so every authorised firearm deployment you see on
Yes.
that log every month.
Yes. Right. I just think it's something, if we've got, pressures in response, it's just something to keep an eye on, isn't it?
I think it's balancing, Commissioners, or what we've got is looking at how we make the best use of our resources. Because they're a highly trained resource, and if they're just use of firearms, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So the next one is for 999 contact. I think in terms of this, we've seen a 14% decrease in volume of 999 calls since August, and a 19% decrease since July. Again, for us, what we're also seeing here is a transfer rate for secondary and alternative lines. We are still under the national 2% guidance and have done for some months now. I think in terms of that, you can see from the chart on the left-hand side as we're looking at it, there's only been 1 month in July where we saw a significant rise in demand where we've been over the 10-second answering time for 999 calls. So I think from my point of view, we've seen sustained improvement in 999 answering time since our investment into the force control room.
So I'm still, as you can imagine, getting feedback about this.
Yeah.
So, and some of it I think will be a legacy issue from when when it was really challenging. I do wonder whether or not there is an opportunity around communications around this, because I think it's put people off calling.
Yeah.
And of course we don't want to put people off calling.
No, absolutely agree. We've done an internal communication
Yeah.
because we've just moved back into the control room
Yeah.
after the refurbishment.
Yeah.
What I have tasked the head of control room to look at for me is where are we nationally? Because we're now actually getting a number of forces approaching us to come and have a look at how we've turned our FCR call handling performance around.
I'm sure the public quite recognise it, yeah.
Well, and
There
this
is a legacy issue.
and this is
yeah.
why I want to do some
Yeah.
benchmarking against
Yeah.
where we are nationally, because actually we've done a lot of good work and we are seeing some significant sustained changes in the way we're handling our calls, and we are getting inquiries from other forces to ask us how we're doing it. So, for example, Devon and Cornwall are approaching us and made early approach to ask for us to do a peer review of their force control room to have a look, because they came and did a peer review of our crime data integrity.
Yeah.
Whilst they were doing that, they were really impressed with the changes we made to the force control room and the performance in there, and asked us if we will come and have a look at if we can support them in making some similar changes. So there is so I've tasked that out. What I'll do, Commissioner, is when that comes back in and we pull that together, I'll bring that to you for consideration.
I absolutely know the hard work everyone's put into it
Yeah.
and chucked the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it seems still entirely reliant on the volume of calls. So the 909 and 101, where volume goes up, call wait time goes up. When volume comes down, call wait time comes down.
There is some of that, I agree, and absolutely, because you've got the same amount of staff in there, they can only answer so many calls in a time. But there are some spikes that we're seeing are because of incident time. So, for example, back in March, where we saw the bad weather, we got a significant number of 999 calls within a 15-minute period. That threw the figures for the whole month. So sometimes it can be one incident that takes place. So I'd imagine,
I think that from the public's point of view, they don't. Generally speaking, they don't mind waiting a couple of minutes. It's when you've got the extremities.
yes.
So
there is.
it's narrowing the bell curve.
Yeah, and I think what
Yeah.
we've got to do is understand what causes those extremities
Yeah.
and see, because if it's
Yeah.
a single incident that's causing those extremities, then perhaps we need to put a message out to the public to explain that that's happening at the moment, and there are longer waiting times at that point in time. That's where we can use some social media messaging and other things probably more wisely. So we'll pull that together. So I think if you look at the next slide, which is the 101 calls, which is predominantly I think where a lot of the issues come in terms of where the public are feeling. The last bullet point at the bottom there, 48% of our 101 calls are answered in under 5 seconds. So this is the bell curve description.
Does,
You're
but
talking
that
about, Commissioner.
also implies a good number are way over 2 minutes.
Exactly. So we're talking about the extremities
Sure.
element of it, and it's understanding what's causing that.
Yeah.
So this is why I've asked for some national benchmarking to go on. Where are we versus other forces? How do we then even that out?
No, go on, Will, go on.
Well, so the other piece of feedback we get, and they're totally hand in hand, we know all this and we've talked about it loads of times, but is the public get really frustrated that this is the only way they can get in touch
Yeah.
and report something at the moment, which is our,
Yes.
obviously a large part of the problem,
Yeah.
why we're author of our own devil in that respect. So understanding, I know there are national plans afoot for online reporting and other things, but knowing where other forces are with that, because there are things we could do on our own if we really wanted to. I think that really frustrates people, that not only is one slow, which they can sometimes deal with, it's that's their only option, and if they don't do that, we don't get the information, and that's it.
So again, so the single online only you're talking about, and also the other content. So we're linked in with Thames Valley Police and Hampshire Police to look at how we can start to maximise some of those other opportunities. I know the work that through the Transform 2020 programme, we're going to key look at whether or not we can do the online reporting, and whether there's more work we can do with our front counter staff and redirecting what they're doing and what their focus is away from administration work to doing more of that online engagement and contact work. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the WhatsApp example again, it's. I mean, so there's a. So if you have a WhatsApp group and you've got a police officer who's part of that WhatsApp group, there's a lot of engagement that could be done on that WhatsApp group that would prevent calls coming into the FCR. But there also needs to be a mechanism by which those calls do come into the FCR if they're needed to come into the FCR for other purposes, and that isn't necessarily that simple. I sort of
There's the intelligence as
I
well
sort
in
of
that
get-
WhatsApp group going on
Yeah.
the system for the next cop that is interested in that.
yes, exactly. So it isn't, but in some respects it is as simple as having a cop on the WhatsApp group, but the mechanisms need to sit behind it to ensure that there is a, and I don't know whether there's a technology interface that could take messages from WhatsApp and put them into a NYP WhatsApp group that would coordinate them all in one place, if you see what I mean.
I do, but I don't know the answer.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't.
Be interesting to see what Everbridge, the new CMS system, can give us, because I know that has an option, the two-way interface.
But
I'm not sure whether it crosses.
But the problem you've got with those types of systems is that you have to spend a huge amount of time and effort getting people to sign up to them, whereas everybody's got WhatsApp and they use it all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot easier an ask to get your communities around a platform that they habitually use than actually getting them to sign up to a specialist system.
Yeah.
And we know it's possible. That's slightly different, but with OpSpartan, that
Yeah.
North Express are more than capable of having an online reporting
We'll
system
take that
for a single time. I think they struggle to keep up in the middle part of that process, but and there is a
huge resource impact to receiving information in another way to then deal with and triage and understand and all those things. But
That's actually Rich Jones.
Yeah.
I'll ask it and just feed it back under the minutes back to us.
Because I mean it's a telephone number, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just a mobile number. So if you've got a central NYP mobile number on every NYP WhatsApp group, all of the WhatsApp messages would end up coming back to that one central number.
good luck being in charge of that fair.
Yeah.
So the other piece of work that we're looking at as well, in terms of the call handling, is always look at the demand flow through the control room, which I think is part and parcel of what we're talking about here, because then actually if we're managing that demand flow better, we're able to then better target what skill sets and resources we need out and about on the streets at the moment. That makes sense.
But it's also proximity, isn't it? So these types of technology platforms make people feel that there's instant access to the police when they need it.
And that's what the current generation want.
Yeah.
Is that instant access.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's
Take
the
that
people
on
of Tadcaster.
yes. So these next slides, I just want to. These are a new presentation on where incident volumes are split within the commands, showing you what average resources per incident are deployed, how long they're at various incidents, and then also the type of incident split by day. Now I think this is something that's developing.
That's interesting.
I think what it probably will help us with, especially when we're starting to look at developing that public safety service model, is actually you can see from the different types of incidents that we're dealing throughout the day what skills we need predominantly within each day of the week. And that again can be broken down into hours, etc., and various things. So I think looking at that, I think would be really interesting. I think for us to then start to compare within a rural area what are the types of incidents that we're receiving during the weekends versus an urban area, and what skill sets do we need in each of those areas, rather than having what we have at the moment, which is a bit of a one-size-fits-all model.
It also be interesting to know, Phil, how local safe and neighbourhood inspectors use this bottom right-hand corner, the wards information to deploy their resources.
Yeah, so that
using wards to understand where how they match effectively.
Yeah, and again, like I say, that will break down into hours each day, so you can say within a 24-hour period where you're more likely to need your resources for crime prevention, where do you need them for anti-social behaviour work. So it's starting to better understand that data.
So I think there's an interesting piece of learning that's going to come out of the domestic abuse in rural areas work, which is going to be interesting full stop, but there's a particular thing around so far of the I think there are 7 counties involved in that. Only one identifies rural areas effectively, and that's Lincolnshire.
Right.
So they know precisely where all of those domestic abuse incidents are and whether they are rural or not, down to postcode level. Whereas we can't do that.
So actually what we have now is we do have a domestic abuse dashboard. So again, that's only launched live this week through the Nexus team. So there's a dashboard for hate crimes, dashboard for domestic abuse. The technology within this should enable us to do that. I think what we've got to do though is make sure that our mapping against our incidents is lined up to the postcodes so that we're getting those accurate. I think that's the challenge for us at the moment.
I agree. And part of the problem that we've got is like Scarborough and Rydale, that is a real mixture.
Yes.
So you can't identify as is Harrogate.
Yeah.
That's a real mixture as well.
Yeah.
And at the moment we can't pinpoint sufficiently accurately.
That's right. So the data will take us down to ward level now.
Well, we need to get down to postcode level.
That's the next challenge for us.
Well, Lincolnshire have done it.
Right.
That's what postcode.
That might be another question for Rich.
As far as I understand it, according to the initial.
It's the quality of the information you get as well, whether that's offender postcode, victim postcode, incident place, which might be a restaurant rather than at home, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But even to get to that, to have those questions would be great.
Yeah.
I think.
But also, we spent some time with PricewaterhouseCoopers this morning discussing, one of the safety service pilot, and it's clear to me that they don't, that the data that they are using is rudimentary around demand, and really rudimentary. And I am concerned that we're going to start making decisions based on quite imperfect information.
Yeah,
I mean, you know
it
that,
is.
Bill.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. This is where the phrase professional judgment comes in, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think, and that's where I think we're going to have to look at. But this is where the data set can't just be ours. It's got to be multi-agency data set. And that
exactly.
hopefully will tease
Yeah.
some of those gaps.
Well, that I think will be really helpful because that adds a richness to it. Because
Yeah.
my concern today was they really were looking at it in a very basic way, and actually, that's a starting point, isn't it? At least they're looking at it, which is what they weren't doing before. But an organisation like that, it is used to number crunching and producing, I think, fairly less sort of nuanced pictures of actually what is going on in the community.
Yeah. And where we might need census data, we might need education data, all of that.
Distance data. So if we could start to look at, average officers and time spent, I bet there is a big difference between rural and urban areas.
Yeah.
But we don't know that at this moment in time, and that starts us to be able to build a much better picture around the relative costs of providing a service if you can start to accurately identify time.
And this is where I think we need to take the MORD system data
Yeah,
and apply it into this as
Yeah.
well, because that will help
yeah,
us
yeah, it will.
with that.
Actually, that's the way to go, isn't it? Yeah.
We spoke a little while ago, boss, didn't we, about that community engagement classification tool, which colleges, we are one of about 7 forces that have taken up the pilot for it. It's like an enhanced mosaic option that Zoe Billings from my team was on a presentation from the colleges, a professor down in Trent University, I think. So we're one of the 7 forces that have taken it on. We've spoken to Mark Bates because I think it's like Mosaic on nitrous. It's got really good multi-agency ability to map your community. But I've not tested it yet, so I think it's something that perhaps we should really focus on with PwC because I've not shared that with
Well,
them.
that'd be really interesting because it's a while since I've personally used some of these tools, but certainly in rural areas, they didn't drill down to a granular enough level.
Yeah.
So we just chose Spofford randomly, looking at that community, and actually in a small, large village like Spofford, you've got a whole range of different sort of housing types, cheap by jowl, and those Mosaic and Acorn analysis tools wouldn't allow you to distinguish between the manor house next to the council house.
Yeah.
There's the shape tool.
Yeah.
To go and use it.
Yeah, well, there's Acorn Health, there's a whole range of them. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll share the tool. Make
It'd
sure
be interesting if it is on nitrox, as you described.
Nitrous.
Whatever it is.
The good thing is I think we're challenging ourselves in the right area.
Yeah.
With this. So this is the page around mental health, looking at where we are around incidents with a mental health tag. I think just in terms of this one for me is the use of police custody. Again, it's still fairly low. What's interesting is for September, actually, it's the first time we've had females in police custody under mental health. So looking at that previously, the previous 2 months we've had 3 males and obviously 1 male, and then there's 2. When you correlate that to the next slide that comes up for me, is you can see in Northallerton 9 female, 136 taken to a place of safety, 5 females in York taken to a place of safety. So significant differences there between male and female 136 detentions.
Well, of course, Northallerton is soon to be no longer. So
yes.
the question is where.
15 out of
So some concerns there around the levels, and again no street triage.
So do we, I know that you look at each of these in detail.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to understand if there's anything specific around that.
So Northallerton at the moment has some repeat
Right.
detentions of 136, which is
Right.
again is some cause for concern around
Yeah.
actually these individuals are not receiving the treatment and
Yeah,
help that they need
exactly.
because they come to our notice time
Yeah.
and again.
Sure.
A positive in
And
terms
how
of
much officer time has been spent on an individual?
yeah, I mean that's still
Mark,
challenging.
yeah.
It's still challenging.
No, I don't mean to say what, but you know, you wonder.
Yeah, it's still challenging for us. A number of officers that are time we're spending at
Yeah.
accident and emergencies and places of safety.
I mean, it's the same case in Richmond.
In terms of a positive, the mode of transport grid there for September, 18
Oh, that's a
transported
lot
by
better.
ambulance, so that is a significant improvement for us.
So there has been,
Um,
through the Mental Health Crisis Care Concordat group, there has been a working group around transport, and I wonder if that's starting to impact.
I'll ask Alex.
I
Yeah.
think, well, with the work Alex has been doing with the mental health advisor, Donna Musgrove, one of the inspectors, because you will see now on the clock log, which was never there before in terms of raising an awareness, every one that involves police transport is now on that clock log, so it's raising it as though this is not acceptable. So it's really setting that setting a tempo about what the expectations are about from our cops.
Yeah.
About this is really serious.
I mean, this is the first time we've seen that flip
Mm.
change
It is,
in numbers,
yeah, it
so I
is,
think we
yeah.
need to monitor it and see
Yeah.
if it's sustainable. But no, I thought that was a really good piece of news. That.
I will feed back on those 9 FEMA because that's really
It is
interesting.
unusual, isn't it? Yeah.
So I'll feed that back, boss. Is that all right?
Yeah. On the next page, looking at the crimes committed again, we're currently seeing an 11.58% rise in overall crime in April to September this year compared to last year. Of note, it's predominantly there's a lot of violence against the person rising crime. The CDI review that we had by the HMICFRS indicated that they would anticipate us to see about a 20% rise in that area around stalking and harassment due to under-recording previously. Plus looking at the other legislation changes that we're looking at around primary crime recording, again working with our crime registrar, we anticipate to see around about a 25% rise in crime for the overall year. So I think overall year to date we're sitting about 19%
So,
increase.
so Phil, is it possible, and I know this is an odd way of putting it, to work out what is a real rise in crime and what is a recorded rise in crime?
Yeah, I think we can. I think what we
Can we estimate it?
We can what we can do is what I'll probably say to you, Commissioner, is I think that around about 20 to 25% of crime was being committed last year that wasn't being captured
Yeah.
properly because we were not necessarily picking up on stalking and harassment crimes in the way that we should have been, which is the vast majority of the violence against the person. So I think it's not necessarily that there's been a significant rise in crime. I think what we're seeing is probably a similar level to last year, but we are recording it more stringently and more appropriately. So we were under-recording previous year.
Public order. So there's a few things there. And I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Particularly robbery, you'd imagine would get reported.
Yeah.
And
And
so
they're small numbers or relatively
Small
small.
numbers.
Yeah,
But
and the
public
same with
order.
burglary. You would anticipate every burglary done would get reported to us.
public order. Where's that come from? Any
So again, public order for us again is we're looking at the changes in where we're recording. Previously, maybe we recorded some antisocial behaviour, and actually we're probably looking at more Section 5 public orders being recorded, more Section 4 public order recorded. There's a lot of focus on us around hate crime. When you look at our hate crime statistics, the vast majority of that is around verbal, racial, or religious abuse within nighttime economies and things like that. So there's a lot of focus on us.
public order.
That's public order, yes. So when you would look at the antisocial behaviour stats, you'll see a drop in antisocial behaviour. Actually, you're probably seeing a rise in that type of recording of crime and a drop in antisocial behaviour.
So the ASB stats look brilliant.
Yeah, but overall, I think it's balancing if you look at the overall incident.
So then the other one obviously that stands out is possession of weapons.
Yes.
No.
So that's
So
county lines.
some of
linked.
that, a significant proportion of
Yeah.
that is the impact of county lines.
Yeah.
And so you'd see the drugs offences for us 24% rise in drugs over the quarter,
Yeah.
and the rise in weapons. A lot of that relates to
Yeah.
the proactivity around county lines.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question, Phil, for next time, if it's possible? It's been ages since we've had a reliable figure on cross-border crime, and my sense is, in reading about lots of these crimes and feedback from the community and local officers and commanders and things, is there's more. It feels like there's more cross-border crime.
Yeah.
Burglary appears to be an issue, and things like county lines is cross-border.
Yeah.
I just wonder if we could have an update on that issue, and we've invested a lot on ANPR, but it, which is working, so we see all the work that results from it, but just understanding that threat and what is being done.
Okay, I'll put
Not
that to
necessarily next month,
session.
just something to log.
I'll see if we can get a report back for you. Okay.
And it would just be helpful to have the trend lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll pick some of these up with
Yeah.
Mark anyway for
Yeah.
feedback.
And could we have KSIs as well,
Yeah, that's in the that's in this.
but on the trend line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, yeah, so in some of the graphs that you're seeing, there's been a drop off in burglary. The spike you see in drug related crime again is county lines activities as well. Where you see the violence against the person, you can see the significant rise there. That's where we're seeing tracking from the changes to our crime data integrity report.
So I think we're going to have to try and find a way to explain some of this, because some of it is crime recording and some of it isn't. And in order to resource the force, we need to understand the difference as well, don't we?
Yes, we do. But
Okay.
I suppose the rise in crime probably we should have had before, but actually
Yeah.
all of these that are recorded still will have had us a form of
Yeah.
investigation or something
Yeah.
on those lines as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they
Yeah.
are all adding to demand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Antisocial behaviour. I think just what I want to flag on this page is 3 out of the 6 areas are showing a significant reduction in missing person and concern for safety. So that's Hamilton, Richmondshire, York and Scarborough Rydell, which I think there's some good work going on with the Missing from Home Working Group in relation to those. I think the rises that we're seeing in Craven and Harrogate area in particular, I think again we're looking to work with the multi-agency safeguarding hub and our local commands to look at putting in plans in place, trying to learn some lessons from actually why we're seeing significant drops in other areas, but we're not necessarily seeing it in that area of the county. So again, we're going to focus on that over the next period as well.
It's interesting to see the impact of that work, isn't it?
It is, because I think if it was a recording element around, if you were seeing a reduction in missing from homes, and if that was about not classifying them properly, you'd probably see a rise in concern for safety. So you'd see an opposite flow, a little bit like we just talked about antisocial behaviour and public order. But actually when you're seeing both reducing, it's saying to me that actually there's some positive work going on in those areas. So we need to try and capture what's working in those areas and share that across the rest of the force.
So just on the Craven KSI figure,
Yeah.
so anecdotally when I've been out and about, particularly with the fire service up in
Yeah.
that neck of the woods, what they're saying is that there's been some really, really good work on the sort of Richmondshire side that has displaced particularly motorbike activity over to sort of Ingleborough and into Craven, and that there's a real issue with that now.
Well, we've seen 2
Yeah.
over this weekend, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've lost 2 motorcycles. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll pick that up with.
Can we pick
APAC.
that up? Yeah.
We've got a 9-to-5 live meeting soon.
Yeah. So there's a definite feeling that there's a displacement effect going on there.
Because of enforcement in Richmondshire.
Yes, it's pushed it over into the sort
am I right
of Settle
thinking
Bentham.
neither deaths were local?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. So.
Yeah.
I think they're both outside. Not that makes a difference, but interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. So
One's Merseyside, I'm sure.
I think you're
Was
right.
that where was that? Was that
65.
They were both
On the
Ingleton and Settle.
yeah? So that's the same area, and they had it 2 weeks ago. There was 2 deaths, 2 motorbike deaths as
Yeah,
well.
I'll pick that up with Dave.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, for the crime slides, I think we've discussed these areas here, but again, the areas that have seen rises in burglaries such as Harrogate and Scarborough. The reason we highlighted the drop-off in burglaries over the last one is because we've seen some significant operational activity in those areas, some arrests made, which has shown some, but unfortunately, because these are over that period of time, we haven't necessarily seen that correlated into this. I'm hoping that the next time we see these figures, we should see them drop off following some of the arrests.
Back to cross-border.
Yeah, although Scarborough you tend to get a lot of homegrown burglars, and yeah, Harrogate tends to be cross-border.
Wimbledon is up. So I think burglaries is interesting. Is it? Well, we know it's.
Well, yeah. There's perception, certainly the perception in Whitby and in the moors and that, northern Scarborough was that it's Cleveland group.
Yeah, there can be something down there for those, yeah. Generally, Cleveland nominals will be targeting your shed burglaries, garage burglaries.
Yeah, it was
will be
our
areas, yeah.
When it says burglary, Phil, then is that dwelling, do you know, or both?
So
It's a mixture
Yeah.
now with
Yeah.
the change, yeah. So the dwelling element has gone. So residential will include your sheds,
Yeah.
or your garages as well.
But there's 1, 2, 3, 4 areas there where there's significant increases in burglary.
Yeah.
Decrease in craving, which is good.
Well, it's an issue, Julie, might be addressed by the third bullet point on the RTF. Here, an issue in the Cleveland area committing crime predominantly in Hamilton.
Okay, so Rural Task Force for August. I won't go through all the writing in relation to it, but just in terms of where we're looking at, there's a National Day of Action that we're taking part in on the 8th of November. Our Rural Task Force, again, for the force, has won an award in relation to the work that they've done. One significant operation of interest was the recovery of 400 stolen animals within force, and I think they've managed to reunite over half of those at the moment, and then an arrest of an individual there who actually came to light as a result of some really good proactive policing and community work.
Is that one crime, Phil, or is that 400 odd crimes?
It will depend on what the individual gets charged with, because the crimes may already have been recorded.
Yeah.
For example, the 2 collie dogs in North Force, their crime may already be recorded in their force area. If they've recorded it as a theft, or if they've recorded it as a lost dog,
Missing dog,
for us, it could be one handling stolen goods. Depends on how the investigation pans out and a whole host of other factors that I'm not citing on, to be honest with you.
No, it sounds complicated, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you could, so I don't know how many, I know some of these are sheep, aren't they?
Rabbits,
Yeah.
chickens, sheep,
Ducks, geese.
goats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the when I was talking to the sergeant on the Royal Task Force, one of the areas for me, what they were telling me is the sheep that they've managed to reunite with the farmer. It's actually it was a significant chunk of their income that they've managed to recover, and actually it was causing them some concern because they weren't able to. There was no income generation for the farm.
Absolutely.
So I think it's understanding, isn't it? I think the impact that it's having, the economic impact it's having on rural areas is significant.
Because people sort of snigger when you talk about livestock theft and some sheep being next, but
There
it's
were
a
400 stolen chickens going down as individual crimes.
well,
Well, if it's one owner and one set of chickens, it'll be one price.
That's good. That's
But
what we
but
need.
some of these aren't, and again, this
They're
is an individual that's taken these animals from around the country.
Oh yeah,
So
no, it's
actually, it's a significant, it's a significant find this. Yeah. So that's it from the crime and social behaviour element. So now it's the people part. I'm just really conscious of time.
yeah.
So just to go on to the police officer, we're still on track for about just under 1,400 officers in March 2019. Again, April 2019 there will be a PCSO recruitment, and we should be then up towards 200, back to 200 for our PCSOs. The reason we've dipped below the 200 for our PCSOs is actually we've had some PCSOs have been successful in an officer recruitment campaign. Police staff, I know in terms of this is a busy slide, but I think in terms of this actually this is going to form part of our Transform 2020, which is probably not a lot for me to discuss in this commissioner.
I'll hop in on that one as well.
Sorry.
Because you did ask by email in the early hours of this morning or last night about the two, the one top line for the OPCC staff budget and the reduction in March 2020, and that's because that doesn't account for 2 temporary posts that take us to the end of this year, and in the corporate services increase for 10 posts for 2020. It isn't an increase, it's we haven't decreased it by that yet for the next financial year.
Right, okay.
That's the reply from. So
Okay.
there are material changes next year. There are things that we haven't adjusted for, which we have this year.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the last slide, just in terms of actually we're still really healthy on police staff volunteers. Our specials is still around 130 maintained, and again we're fluctuating around that because we've got some success in those specials becoming regular police officers. Again, I think the use and expanded use of our police staff volunteers, Alan's picking up through the work that he's doing with Tasha and around neighbourhood policing.
Yeah, 377 volunteers now, I think, roughly. And some work around special constables we're looking at in terms of making it more bespoke rather than the weekend after weekend and then hemorrhaging them to the organisation, which is great, but we just want to make sure that the special constabulary is more bespoke in terms of the needs, right? So if we, you know, for example, the mental health aspect, right? Are we going to the NHS or bespoke organisations to get individuals that might be able to be recruited as specials with mental health skills? You know, so individual cybercrime champions that we've got, can we use them in the digital forensic unit and giving them just the core skills around use of force and officer safety? They don't need to learn about traffic and all the other stuff, they just do those particular things to get a bigger turnover.
And cyber's where we've had some really great success with
Yeah.
those volunteers. They've
Good
really
success.
enhanced some of our investigative capability for our teams. So, and that's it, Commissioner.
All right, brilliant. Thank you. Apologies that we've run over by 10 minutes. Apologies. So we're back here on the 27th of November.
Victims.
Victims. Okay, great.
Any
Thank you very much.
questions?
Any questions?
No, no
No.
questions.
Fantastic. Thank you.